Chapter 316. Fire was the source of light in the world. It was something that illuminated the darkness. It was warmth, hope, and the beginning of all living things. Even when the flame was burning, it was still warm, bright, and scorching. And if one day, the flame turned black, no longer bright, no longer warm, and even cold, what would happen? On this day, the barbarians of the Divine Wood tribe in the northern wilderness saw the result. Darkness engulfed the sky and the earth, pressing down heavily. It surrounded the entire tribe's campsite with the aura of a legendary demon. Then, in the mournful whistling of the night wind, in the depths of the endless darkness, in the shadows that seemed to have solidified, there was suddenly something strange twisting and shaking. Then, it slowly took shape from the darkness, twisting and stepping out. It was a monster that was completely black. It was neither a ferocious demon beast nor was it a stone puppet. It looked to be several dozen meters tall and could barely be considered a human. However, it had 4 heads and 8 arms. Each face was different, but all of them were ferocious, like an evil spirit. Once the strange demon stepped out of the darkness, the entire Divine Wood tribe camp immediately fell into a solemn and deathly silence. Not only did the people of the Divine Wood tribe retreat in fear, even the witchcraft-demonized warriors of the Black Fire tribe were shocked. Only Huayan, who was in the crowd, suddenly had a flash of ecstasy in his eyes after his body trembled. Compared to the other tribal warriors, he had been raised as the successor of the tribe since he was a child. Naturally, he knew more about the history and matters of the Black Fire tribe. The terrifying monster in front of him was a terrifying monster that was summoned by the incomparably powerful shaman during the most powerful era of the Black Fire tribe thousands of years ago. It was called the Shadow Devil. The nature of the Shadow Devil was actually similar to the stone puppet that the Mountain Spirit tribe's shaman had summoned, but in terms of combat power and ferocity, it was far superior to the stone puppet. It was one of the most terrifying creatures summoned by witchcraft in the history of the southern wilderness. Huayan had never thought that a human like Lu Chen, who seemed to have just received the inheritance of the fire god, and whose cultivation and strength were not too strong, would be able to suddenly summon such a powerful shadow devil. It was no wonder that this human man was so unbelievably confident before the battle began. Thinking of this, Huayan felt the blood in his body boil, as if in that instant, he really saw the hope of reviving his tribe. He fiercely turned around and roared at the enemies in front of him. Waving his giant axe, he charged forward, killing everything in his path. This immediately alerted the surrounding comrades. The warriors of the Black Fire tribe roared out in anger and started killing. Immediately, blood flowed like a river, turning the Divine Wood tribe's camp into a terrifying purgatory. At the same time, when everyone's attention was attracted by the shadow demon, the black shadow in the sky silently descended and landed on the ground outside the Divine Wood tribe's camp. In the darkness, as soon as Lu Chen's feet touched the ground, he suddenly felt his legs go soft. He staggered forward and almost fell to the ground. Fortunately, at this time, a black shadow suddenly sprang out from the darkness. It was the black wolf Atsu, who directly used its back to support Lu Chen. The Vulcan staff fell on the yellow ground with a paw sound. Lu Chen lay on Atsu's body, his face pale as he gasped for breath. After a while, he seemed to be able to catch his breath and let out a long sigh. Atsu looked back at Lu Chen worriedly and called out in a low voice. Lu Chen forced a smile at it, then sat on the ground. After panting a few more times, he opened his mouth and said, "This damned witchcraft, I don't know where it came from. Even a slightly more powerful witchcraft seems to take my life." Atsu's huge head leaned over and rubbed against Lu Chen's chest, but it didn't seem to know what to do. After a while, it lay down beside Lu Chen. Lu Chen looked at the black wolf with a trace of warmth in his eyes. He reached out and gently patted its head, then raised his head to look at the battlefield below. After the terrifying shadow demon joined the battlefield, the Divine Wood tribe's desperate resistance instantly collapsed. Almost no one could resist this terrifying demon, especially when a few of the bravest and strongest Divine Wood tribe warriors rushed forward but were caught by a single palm. Then they were torn apart and killed in front of everyone. All the Divine Wood tribe barbarians seemed to have completely collapsed. No one dared to resist anymore. Everyone was fleeing in fear. The outcome of this battle was completely determined, and it was only a matter of time before it ended. Lu Chen retracted his gaze. Taking advantage of the fact that there was no one around, he casually leaned on Atsu's back and muttered. Then he said in a low voice, "How is this a fire god? It's obviously a death god." The Black Fire Tribe's surprise attack on the Divine Wood Tribe was a complete victory during the night. However, the final battle only ended at daybreak. There weren't many battles in the later stages. Instead, it was more about the Divine Wood Tribe that were almost driven mad by fear. The Shadow Demon disappeared not long after the outcome of the battle was decided. To be honest, this terrifying demon actually didn't kill too many people. However, its terrifying power was unparalleled, and it was a decisive force that influenced the outcome of the battle. At daybreak, the Black Fire Tribe barbarian warriors led by Huayan were no longer in a state of enchantment. All of them returned to their normal appearances. But even so, the completely defeated Divine Wood Tribe could no longer put up any resistance. Unlike the sneak attack on the Black Fire Tribe, the Divine Wood Tribe suffered a heavy blow this time. The tribe's camp was in a mess. Blood flowed like a river, and corpses and broken limbs could be seen everywhere. Among the survivors, not many managed to escape. In fact, most of the surviving Divine Wood Tribe members were intercepted by the warriors of the Black Fire Tribe. When the first ray of sunlight fell from the sky, the remaining barbarians of the Divine Wood Tribe were gathered in a corner of the camp. Around them were ferocious-looking barbarian warriors of the Black Fire Tribe. Their eyes were ferocious, and the blades and axes in their hands were still wet with blood. A little further away was the land of carnage. Who knew how many lives had been lost there? The originally thriving tribe's camp was now in ruins. Houses and walls had collapsed, and many places still had traces of being burnt. The morning breeze carried a strong smell of blood that made people want to vomit. In the sky above the tribe's camp, there were already a few vultures and a large flock of crows circling in the air, cawing as they smelled the blood. It was in such a hellish scene that Lu Chen, who was wearing a black robe with his face hidden in a deep hood, slowly walked into the already fallen tribe's camp with the huge black wolf Atsu by his side. The black robe seemed to block out all the light. Even though it was daytime, no one could see the face of this human male clearly. But Atsu, who stood beside him, attracted everyone's attention. That ferocious beast's appearance was a perfect foil to this terrifying shaman's aura. There was no longer any doubt in the eyes of the warriors of the Black Fire Tribe. Everyone, even the most ferocious and valiant warriors, were filled with reverence in front of this black-robed priest. They respectfully made way for him. Lu Chen silently walked forward, calmly treating all the reverence and fear in the surroundings. Under his feet, he crossed the river of blood. Then, he left bloody footprints on the road, all the way to the Divine Wood Tribe's captives. "Priest, it's the priest!" Terrified, soft voices came from the captives. There were many women, children, and elderly among the captives of the Godwood Tribe, as well as many adult men. Even the patriarch of the Godwood Tribe was not dead yet. He had only lost an arm, and as a form of treatment that was different from the other tribesmen, he was tied with an extra rope and thrown in front of the crowd in a rough manner. At this moment, he stared at the black-robed priest with his eyes wide open. His face was filled with disbelief. But whether it was Lu Chen or the other warriors of the Black Fire Tribe, no one paid attention to him. Huayan stood in front of the crowd and watched as Lu Chen walked over. Then he strode forward, stretched out his hands, and grasped Lu Chen's arm. Then, he nodded heavily. "We won," he said. "We won this battle." Lu Chen raised his head slightly and smiled in the shadow of the black hood. Then, he said in a low voice, "Didn't I tell you before? We will win. Let's begin." The black-robed Lu Chen said to Huayan. The people standing closest to Huayan were his two most trusted warriors. One was Iron Bear, and the other was Black Bull. At this moment, they turned to look at Huayan. They did not seem to understand what Lu Chen meant. But after this battle, even such powerful warriors like them were filled with reverence for Lu Chen. Huayan hesitated for a moment and said in a low voice, "I still think it's very difficult. We barbarians would rather die than betray our ancestors." Beside him, Iron Bear and Black Yak were immediately moved. They wore astonished expressions. Lu Chen's hood moved slightly, but he didn't seem to mind. He only said casually, "Let's try." "All right." Huayan seemed to have finally made up his mind. He turned and walked towards the captives of the Divine Wood Tribe. On the other hand, Lu Chen turned around, as if he wasn't interested in what was going to happen next. Instead, after his gaze swept across the bloody and messy battlefield, he suddenly exclaimed in surprise, as if he had discovered something. Then, he walked towards the center of the tribe's camp not far away. There was a stone altar that looked like it was used to worship the tribe's ancestors. At this moment, most of it had been destroyed. But in the pile of rubble, where fresh blood had been splattered, Lu Chen's gaze fell on something. It was a white bone mask that looked broken and ancient. At the same time, Hua Yan's voice came from behind him. It was steady and loud, echoing in the sky above the tribe. Now you have two choices. Chapter 317. The white bone mask in Lu Chen's hand wasn't the skull of a human. Although the barbarians worshipped their ancestors, it was common for them to preserve the remains of their ancestors and worship them. However, the thing in Lu Chen's hand had two horns, and the shape of its face was completely different from that of a barbarian. It seemed more like an unknown demon beast. Something that could be enshrined on the altar in the middle of a tribe's camp could be considered rather important to a barbarian tribe. However, Lu Chen couldn't tell the origin of this white bone mask. When he held it in his hand, it didn't feel rough at all. Instead, he felt a warm radiance from the tip of his finger. It seemed that after a long period of time, the material of the white bone mask had quietly changed. It was now almost like jade. Even though the shape of the mask was still a little scary, Lu Chen could no longer feel the dense aura of death from it. He played with the white bone mask for a while, then held it in his hand and walked back. At the same time, Hua Yan's voice was still echoing, and it quickly caused an uproar among the captives of the Divine Wood tribe. Hua Yan explained his intentions very simply to everyone. He gave them two choices. 1. Give up your original worship, throw away everything, and join the Black Fire tribe, becoming a part of the Black Fire tribe. The second choice was death. Of course, this was the idea that Lu Chen had proposed to Hua Yan, and he had tried his best to convince him to carry it out. However, even though Hua Yan trusted Lu Chen, he was still very skeptical of this idea. And it wasn't just Hua Yan. Even the barbarian warriors like Iron Bear and Black Bull all shook their heads when they heard of this idea. To a barbarian tribe, there was nothing more important than the gods and ancestors they worshipped. To overthrow all of this and make them submit to a tribe might be even more difficult than killing them. Hua Yan and the others did not believe that this method would succeed, but Lu Chen insisted on trying. As for the reason, the others did not know, and probably only Hua Yan knew. What Lu Chen wanted was to use the fastest, fiercest, and most direct method to increase the strength of the Black Fire tribe. The biggest problem in front of them was that the population of the Black Fire tribe was too small. If they wanted to return to the peak of their power, they would need to increase their population by at least 10 times. Lu Chen did not have the patience to wait, and Hua Yan did not want to wait any longer. However, the reality was the reality. When Hua Yan told all the barbarians of the Divine Wood tribe about this, there was a moment of astonishment and silence. Then, a loud clamor broke out. It was unknown how many barbarians were cursing and swearing. Their expressions were agitated as if they wanted to rush over and tear this enemy who had slandered their ancestors into pieces. And in front of the crowd, the chief of the Divine Wood tribe roared angrily. With unknown strength, he actually jumped up from the ground, as if he wanted to rush over and die with Hua Yan. But before he could get close, he was kicked away by the tall and burly Tai Xiong, who was standing next to Hua Yan, with a sneer. Bang! The chief of the Divine Wood tribe rolled a few times on the ground like a gourd, his face covered in dirt for a moment. Many Divine Wood barbarians in the crowd looked agitated, and jumped up one after another, wanting to fight with their lives on the line. But the warriors of the Black Fire tribe standing at the side immediately suppressed them. Shouts, curses, and sounds of suppression filled the air. In the middle of the crowd, there were people who pulled out their swords and slashed a few times, causing blood to appear. After a while, the group of restless barbarians were finally suppressed. Although Hua Yan had already expected the situation, he still felt somewhat embarrassed. The veins on his forehead were throbbing, and he wished he could directly raise his sword and hack a few of them to death. But at this moment, a hand suddenly stretched out from the side and pulled him back. Hua Yan turned around and saw the black-robed Lu Chen walking to his side. "Don't worry." Lu Chen's voice sounded very calm. Hua Yan snorted and said, "You have also seen the situation, what should we do now?" Lu Chen lightly said, "Let me do it." He took a step forward, his eyes sweeping across the crowd in front of him. For a moment, almost everyone's eyes fell on him. Many of the Divine Wood tribe's captives looked at the black-robed priest with eyes full of hatred and fear. After a moment, Lu Chen opened his mouth and said, "Drag out all the children and women under the age of 8. As soon as these words came out, there was a sudden silence. After a moment, the Divine Wood tribe was filled with curses, while the warriors of the Black Fire tribe looked at each other in dismay. Many people's eyes uniformly looked at Hua Yan, who was standing beside Lu Chen. Lu Chen slightly turned around, also looking at Hua Yan. Hua Yan hesitated for a moment, then suddenly clenched his teeth and said in a deep voice, "Listen to the priest." As soon as he gave the order, dozens of warriors of the Black Fire tribe rushed into the crowd like wolves and tigers, grabbing, pulling, dragging, and pulling. The Divine Wood tribe's crowd was immediately filled with cries and screams. There was no lack of people who fought with their lives on the line, but under the powerful strength of the Black Fire tribe, the result of this resistance was just a few more corpses on the ground. Then, Lu Chen's order was completely carried out. About half of the women and children in the crowd were captured and alone on the other side of the field. These people with the weakest battle strength looked to be shivering with fear on their faces. No one knew what the terrifying black-robed demon was going to do next. But Lu Chen did not let them wait for too long. He quickly made everyone understand his thoughts. These women and children, whether you like it or not, will become a part of the Black Fire tribe. Lu Chen's cold and calm voice reverberated in the camp. Apart from that, there was no other sound. At this moment, even the air seemed to be filled with a sense of coldness and killing intent. If there are men in the family, let them come and claim them. If no one wants to claim them, then directly distribute them to the Black Fire warriors today. Let them go back and serve the Black Fire warriors and give birth to their children. As soon as these words came out, the faces of the Divine Wood tribe on both sides changed, while the warriors of the Black Fire tribe were overjoyed. Many of them laughed out loud. In the southern wilderness, due to the harsh living conditions, murder and looting were not uncommon. Women and children who had lost their protection were indeed often robbed. But it could be said that it was the first time in many years that Lu Chen planned to directly divide up such a large group of women after the war. While the Black Fire tribe warriors were excited, the Divine Wood tribe naturally looked as if they had lost their parents. Many women and children cried out. However, Lu Chen did not care about this. It seemed that his heart was much colder and harder than these barbarians. Then, Lu Chen directly pointed to the Divine Wood tribe's patriarch who was lying on the ground. His face was covered in blood. He said, "You are the patriarch. Come and identify them first." The Divine Wood patriarch's body swayed, and he looked like he was about to start cursing again. Lu Chen said coldly, "If you don't come over to claim them, you'll be given to my warriors as slaves." The Divine Wood tribe's patriarch gnashed his teeth, but in the end, he had no choice but to climb up. Then, under the sorrowful and indignant gazes of everyone, he staggered to the front of the group of women and children and began to claim his own women and children. In this wasteland, the primitive barbarians respected strength, and it was extremely common for men to be superior to women. As the patriarch of the tribe, the Divine Wood tribe's patriarch had actually pointed out 7 women and 2 children. Clearly, he had lived a very comfortable life in the past. The Black Fire tribe's barbarian warriors who were watching with great interest seemed to be filled with jealousy and hatred. A few of them even began to curse, clearly feeling very unbalanced. The Divine Wood tribe's patriarch knew that the situation was not in his favor, so he did not care. He lowered his head and planned to lead his people back. But at this moment, suddenly, a black figure blocked in front of him. It was that mysterious, terrifying, cold and ruthless black-robed priest. "Wait a moment," Lu Chen said calmly. The Divine Wood tribe's camp was instantly silent. Everyone looked over at Lu Chen. The original Vulcan staff had already disappeared. At this moment, the only thing in his hand was the white bone mask that he had casually grabbed. His entire body was hidden in the seemingly ancient black robe, which made him look even colder. After a moment, the Divine Wood tribe's patriarch seemed to have plucked up his courage and asked, "What do you want?" "Our warrior leader has spoken just now," said Yi Zichen. Lu Chen's hood moved slightly, then he looked up at the barbarian in front of him and said, "Join the Black Fire or die. Choose one." The Divine Wood tribe's patriarch's face twisted, but even if he did not turn his head to look, he knew that all his tribesmen were looking at him. He clenched his teeth and suddenly roared, "Impossible, you must be dreaming." Lu Chen looked at him coldly, his fingers moving slightly, and the white bone mask flipped in his palm, emitting a strange white light. After a moment, Lu Chen suddenly picked up the mask and silently and slowly placed it on his face. At the same time he said lightly, "Okay." The white bone mask slowly descended on the human man's face. Strangely, the mask instantly and firmly attached to his face, without any signs of slipping off. All the clansmen of the Divine Wood tribe were in an uproar. But very quickly, they saw a pair of dark eyes appear behind the terrifying bone mask. Two black flames burned behind the terrifying eye sockets, like the eyes of a demon, and fell on the Divine Wood tribe's patriarch. "In that case you can die." The Divine Wood tribe's patriarch was first shocked, then angry. Just as he was about to resist, his expression suddenly changed. He grabbed his throat with both hands and shouted hoarsely. A ball of black flame suddenly spewed out from his mouth. Then, it grew 10 times larger as it faced the wind and directly engulfed his entire body. In an instant, a shrill and miserable howl resounded through the entire camp. Chapter 3:18. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the black flames engulfed the chief of the Divine Wood tribe. But just like what the black flames had shown in the past, it did not harm the flesh and blood of the human body. Everyone could also see that the chief's body did not suffer any obvious injuries. His flesh and skin were almost completely unharmed in the black flames, as if nothing had happened. However, even though the patriarch of the Divine Wood tribe was unscathed in the black flames, he seemed to have suffered the most terrifying pain in the world. He howled, roared, and cried, throwing the toughness of blood that all barbarians valued the most to the back of his mind. It was as if the pain he was suffering had completely destroyed his will. In the end, he could not even stand. He fell to the ground, rolling and struggling in pain. In his despair, he even began to beg the terrifying black-robed priest for mercy. However, Lu Chen just stood there, silent and motionless. The black robe covered his figure, and the bone mask covered his face. Everyone could only see his deep, dark eyes and the burning black flames. Just like that, under everyone's shocked and incredulous gazes, the Divine Wood patriarch slowly died under the condition that his flesh, skin, and clothes weren't burned. His body was extremely twisted, and there were many wounds on his body. But everyone could clearly see that those wounds had been caused by the chief's own clawing. Just what kind of terrifying pain could make a barbarian fall into such a state of despair? When the final howls gradually faded, the air was filled with a frozen coldness. Almost everyone's eyes were filled with fear, including the warriors of the Black Fire tribe standing at the side. No one would question the identity of the black-robed priest anymore. This terrifying, cruel, vicious, suffocating, and mysterious method was the most revered witchcraft in the southern wilderness for thousands of years. When the black flames dissipated, Lu Chen's eyes behind the bone mask once again looked at the twisted corpse on the ground. His pupils seemed to contract slightly, as if he had recalled the painful memories that had haunted him for many years. Next, a cold and calm voice came from behind the bone mask, echoing in the camp. 2 warriors of the Black Fire tribe rushed forward and dragged out a barbarian man from the Divine Wood tribe, throwing him in front of Lu Chen. When the barbarian raised his head, he felt a shadow looming over him. The black-robed priest appeared not too far away from him. It was as if the priest had blocked all the light, making the barbarian feel as if the entire world was dark. A hoarse voice came out of the barbarian's mouth. No one could understand what he was saying, or perhaps he didn't say anything at all. However, before he could take another step forward, Lu Chen suddenly said, "Wait." Then, he turned around and looked at the corpse. He pointed at the woman and child that had been claimed by the dead chief of the Divine Wood tribe and said coldly, "Take these people to the side and distribute them to the warriors of the tribe when we get back." The barbarian warriors of the Black Fire tribe immediately burst into laughter, while the people of the Divine Wood tribe were filled with grief and despair. But this did not change anything. Amidst the cries of the women, they were brought to the other side. Then, Lu Chen turned around and looked at the barbarian and said, "It's your turn. Go and identify them." The barbarian's body trembled, as if he could no longer move. Lu Chen said indifferently, "If you recognize them, there's still hope to save them. If you don't, they will definitely be taken away." The barbarian's face was ashen, as if he had lost all his life. But in the end, he still went to the group of women and claimed a woman and a child that was still in swaddling clothes. The child seemed to have been born not long ago. It was a small ball wrapped in a piece of animal skin. It was held in the arms of the woman who was also trembling and crying. For some reason, when Lu Chen saw the crying tears of the barbarian woman and the child, his heart suddenly palpitated. For a moment, He could clearly feel that somewhere in the depths of his heart seemed to soften. After a moment, he turned around and looked at the barbarian man. "It's your turn to choose. There are two paths. Which one will you choose?" The man's gaze stayed on his wife and child. His face was full of pain and struggle. Anyone could see the hesitation on his face, but he did not really give up. Instead, a trace of determination gradually appeared on his face, as if he was about to make a decision. But at this time, Lu Chen suddenly said, "You should know that no matter what, after today, there will no longer be a divine wood tribe in this world." The barbarian man's body trembled, and the other divine wood tribe members in the distance were also in an uproar. Lu Chen did not care about this at all. He just said indifferently, "Those who are willing to surrender, swear to join the Black Fire tribe and protect your family and children. Those who are not willing to surrender, I will kill them." Without the divine wood tribe, why do you still worship the gods and ancestors? Or are you willing to watch your wife give birth to someone else's child and become a slave for your own child? As he said this, he pointed at the relatives and children of the divine wood tribe's chief. The barbarian man's expression was extremely ugly. The determination on his face disappeared, and his expression changed rapidly. He looked as if he was about to collapse. Suddenly, as if in despair, he roared and shouted at Lu Chen, "Even if I surrender, how can you guarantee that the people of the Black Fire tribe won't come to steal my women?" Lu Chen took a step forward and pointed to the sky without hesitation. He said in a clear voice, "I swear to the fire god worshipped by the Black Fire tribe and to the ancestors that as long as you swear to be loyal to me and join the Black Fire tribe, I will treat you equally. If there is any conflict, I will deal with it fairly. If not, let the heavens send down divine punishment and destroy the Black Fire tribe." This oath was said resolutely and without hesitation. The content of this oath was the most important among the barbarian tribes of the wilderness. It could be said to be impeccable. With Lu Chen's words, the expressions of many people of the divine wood tribe changed subtly. But on the other side, on the side of the warriors of the Black Fire tribe, Hua Yan's facial muscles twitched slightly. He stared at the black-robed priest and seemed to grit his teeth. Struggle and hesitation were rare emotions for a barbarian, especially when it involved such a major matter that could overturn the previous half of their lives. Most people would be at a loss. But on this day, when the barbarian man was the first to cry and say that he was willing to surrender to his wife and children, full of shame and despair, the whole camp of the divine wood tribe was filled with a cold and dead atmosphere. Even the warriors of the Black Fire tribe had a very ugly expression on their faces. In this wasteland, no one had ever heard of anyone forcing a barbarian to betray his ancestors and beliefs. That kind of pain and despair could be felt by every barbarian, whether it was the barbarians from the divine wood tribe or the barbarians from the Black Fire tribe. Their gazes were either filled with hatred, fear, or reverence as they stared at the black-robed priest. The white bone mask made the man look so terrifying and strange. What happened next became numb and cruel. They had to choose between two paths. There was no other possibility, and the price was the barbarians' lives and the fate of their families. The southern wilderness had been a harsh place for survival for a long time. But on this day, the barbarians in the camp, whether they were from the divine wood tribe or the Black Fire tribe, seemed to have come to a new understanding of this fact. Some people surrendered in despair for their own lives and the fate of their families. They abandoned their ancestors, turned their backs on their gods, and swore an oath to join the Black Fire tribe. There were also some divine wood barbarians who were unyielding and would rather die than surrender. What awaited them was the purgatory of the Black Fire tribe, and the scene of their women and children being carved up as slaves in front of everyone. Scene after scene, cold, cruel and suffocating, played out until the end. In the evening of that day, the warriors of the Black Fire tribe left with a large group of people and set foot on the road back to the city. Many people in the crowd carried big and small bags on their backs, their faces filled with sorrow and pain. Behind them, a fire slowly rose to the sky. The once prosperous Divine Wood tribe camp was engulfed in flames, and the name of the Divine Wood tribe, after this night, forever disappeared in the night of the southern wilderness. In front of the night, there were stars, dark clouds, and even more, deep and boundless darkness, shrouding the vast land of the wilderness. Chapter 319. Thousands of years had passed in the southern wilderness. Countless tribes rose and fell, and countless people lived and died. The only thing that never changed was the desolate land and the endless wind and sand. Too much time had passed, and one's vision was too far away. It would make people numb. The tribes that had perished and the people that had died would no longer have the power to move people. They would be submerged in the long river of time, buried in the dust of history, and easily forgotten by most people. Even if some people remembered them, or saw bits and pieces of them from some ancient books, they would just turn the page with an indifferent face. Hua Yan was the most outstanding barbarian in the Black Fire tribe for many years. Not only did he have a strong body and fierce fighting power, but he also had vision and decisiveness that almost no one else in the tribe had. Perhaps it was because of this that he had never been willing to be ordinary. He did not want to be suppressed in the harsh and barren north of the wilderness, and spent his life fighting with the other 4 tribes. He knew and remembered the glory of the ancient ancestors of the Black Fire tribe. Ever since he was a child, his biggest dream was to restore his tribe to its former glory. At the same time, he would engrave his name in the history of the tribe as the hero of the revival of the tribe. He would be remembered, praised, and spread by thousands of generations of descendants. It was also for the same reason that he had never thought that he would become a stepping stone, that he would silently dedicate his life to benefit his descendants, and that he would accumulate his strength. The success he wanted was right now, right in this life. Unfortunately, Hua Yan himself did not possess that kind of powerful power. That was the most powerful and supreme power in the southern wilderness: witchcraft. Therefore, when he suddenly saw the black fire on Lu Chen's body that day, this barbarian resolutely and inconceivably made the biggest gamble of his life in that short period of time. He desperately dragged a human man onto the pirate ship of the Black Fire tribe, and then pinned the hope of the tribe's revival on him. For this, he piously prayed to the god of fire. Just like in the past, the god of fire remained silent and did not respond. For thousands of years, the privilege of communicating with the god of fire only belonged to shamans and priests who had the power of witchcraft. Hua Yan did not know what the god of fire thought of his decision, but he could see that the Black Fire tribe had destroyed the Divine Wood tribe, which used to be on an equal footing with them, in one night. This was a glorious victory that the Black Fire tribe had never had in hundreds of years. This was an unimaginable eruption of the Black Fire tribe after years of decline. Perhaps this was the sign of the Black Fire tribe's rise again. Unlike the Divine Wood tribesmen who were at a loss about their future and had just experienced the extermination of their tribe, every warrior of the Black Fire tribe was extremely excited. As their leader, Hua Yan undoubtedly understood the importance of this battle. He could even imagine how the entire northern region of the wilderness would be shaken when the news that the Divine Wood tribe had been annihilated by the Black Fire tribe spread within a few days. The impact of this battle was even greater than the battle between the 4 races and the Mountain Spirit clan. In the darkness of the night, under the illumination of the torches, the troop moved forward. Except for Hua Yan and the huge black wolf Atsu, no one dared to approach the black-robed priest, whether it was the captives who had surrendered in fear or the warriors of the Black Fire tribe. "You've done well." Because there was no one around, it was easier for the two to talk. Hua Yan lowered his voice and said to Lu Chen. The hood on Lu Chen's head moved, and he turned his head to look at Hua Yan. In the light of the fire, his figure seemed like an illusory shadow, and the white bone mask covering his face made him look even more sinister and terrifying. Hua Yan frowned and said, "I don't like you wearing this mask. It's not something of our tribe." Lu Chen was silent for a moment, and then reached out to take off the white bone mask. When his human face, which was out of place among the people around him, reappeared in front of Hua Yan, for some reason, Hua Yan seemed to be relieved. "That's good," he said. "Are you satisfied with the result of this battle?" Lu Chen asked him. Hua Yan smiled and nodded, saying, "I can't think of a better result." As he said this, his expression became serious, and he looked at the people behind him, saying in a low voice, "It's only these people that I'm still a little worried about." Lu Chen said lightly, "I've already told you the reason why I'm doing this. This is something that can't be helped. Your tribe has been in decline for too long, and your strength is too weak. If you want to compete with the large tribes in the south, you can only take an unconventional approach if you want to see results in a short period of time." Hua Yan was silent, but there was still a trace of worry on his face. He said, "Are you really confident?" Lu Chen looked at the darkness in front of him, and after a while he said, "We'll subdue as many as we can. As for those that we can't subdue, or those that refuse to sincerely submit, I'll let you handle them." Hua Yan nodded, his face cold, and with a trace of murderous intent, he didn't say anything else. As a barbarian and the leader of the tribe, he was used to seeing blood, killing, and death. He naturally wouldn't be soft-hearted. That's right. How did you summon that shadow demon? After a while, Hua Yan asked Lu Chen again, a trace of surprise and faint excitement on his face. I've heard of this thing when I was young. It's one of the most powerful monsters. Lu Chen hesitated for a while, then said, It's the Fire God Staff's credit. Fire God Staff? Hua Yan didn't understand, and asked, What about the Fire God Staff? Lu Chen said, After it returned to its original state in the Fire God altar, you might not have felt it, but I could feel that after the Fire God Staff merged into one, its spiritual power greatly increased, and it also has an unimaginable power. When using the Fire God's witchcraft, it seems to have the effect of amplifying the power by 10 times. What? Even though Hua Yan was already used to being surprised these days, at this moment, he still couldn't help but be shocked. Lu Chen seemed to have already expected such a reaction from Hua Yan. He smiled bitterly and said, That's right. You also know that it hasn't been long since I came into contact with the Fire God's inheritance. There are many witchcraft that I can't use, but with the help of the Fire God Staff, it's much more convenient. This is also the biggest reason why I dared to boast to you that we can definitely win against the Divine Wood tribe. Hua Yan let out a long breath, nodded and said, I see. Then he revealed a happy expression and said, If that's the case, as long as you diligently train, your cultivation will increase, and with this God's staff, won't even the shaman. He didn't dare to continue, but the meaning in his words was very clear. However, Lu Chen shook his head and said, I feel that this matter isn't as good as you think. Hua Yan was stunned and said, Why? Lu Chen said, I vaguely feel that this kind of powerful effect probably has an upper limit. Once the power of the Black Fire God reaches a certain level, the Fire God Staff will no longer have such a powerful help. Otherwise, how many powerful shamans and priests did your Black Fire tribe produce in the past? With just this Fire God Staff, you would be able to flatten the southern wilderness and unify all the races in the north. Hua Yan slowly nodded, looking a little disappointed, but he still smiled and said, You are right. But after so long, there's something I can't figure out. Lu Chen said, What's wrong? Lu Chen looked at him and said, Since the Fire God Staff is so powerful, why did the ancestors of your Black Fire tribe split it into two and only brought one half to the north? He smiled and casually said, It can't be that the shamans or priests of your Black Fire tribe in that era, when countless barbarian armies attacked the north, secretly decided that they would lose this battle, so they secretly left the Fire God Staff behind and left a spark for your Black Fire tribe, right? Hua Yan was stunned at first, then laughed and said, How is that possible? Lu Chen also laughed and said, That's right, it's impossible. That's why I can't figure it out. Hua Yan shrugged his shoulders and said, Then don't think about it. Look in front of us. After walking for a while, we should be able to see our tribe's campsite. Father and the rest should be anxiously waiting for us. Lu Chen slightly narrowed his eyes and said, Let's go back and take a look. I don't know what they will think when they see the Divine Wood tribe people. Hua Yan's face stiffened and he didn't say anything. Chapter 320. When Hua Yan returned to the Black Fire tribe's camp with this unprecedented victory, the anxious tribesmen who had been waiting for a long time immediately cheered. The entire Black Fire tribe seemed to be boiling with excitement. After returning to the camp from the secret cave in the oasis, they were most worried about their loved ones who had left for the war. Even if the barbarians were savage, fierce and wild, they still had kinship and humanity. For example, among the Divine Wood tribe's people who had surrendered, there were many barbarian warriors who would rather die than surrender. However, under the premise of the tribe's destruction, and when Lu Chen coldly threatened them with the fate of their families, they finally surrendered. Of course, it was also possible that some of them already had the desire to live in their hearts, but they had no excuse in front of the gods and ancestors. Lu Chen just happened to present this almost perfect excuse in front of them, allowing them to live with some humiliation but peace of mind. As for the truth of the matter, no one knew what everyone was thinking. Only they themselves would know. The news of the Black Fire tribe's warriors annihilating the Divine Wood tribe in one fell swoop spread throughout the Black Fire tribe's camp. Great joy immediately enveloped the entire tribe. However, when people saw the Divine Wood tribe's captives following behind the Black Fire tribe's warriors, they were all taken aback. When they heard that under the leadership of the black-robed priest, these Divine Wood tribe barbarians were about to become a part of the Black Fire tribe, the entire camp suddenly burst into an uproar. The Divine Wood tribe, which had been exterminated, was naturally uncomfortable with swallowing so many people from other tribes at once. However, for the Black Fire tribe, which was the victor, it was an unprecedented event. For many years, the barbarians of the southern wilderness had already become familiar with and accustomed to the original rules. In their minds, worshipping the gods and revering their ancestors was a matter of course. No one would ever think of betraying these rules and joining another tribe. Of course, those who had such thoughts now seemed to have not encountered the desperate situation that the Divine Wood tribe had encountered. But no matter what, most of the Black Fire tribe's barbarians couldn't accept this. However, no one in the camp dared to rebuke them. The reason was very simple. Apart from the mysterious and terrifying black-robed priest, the leader of this operation was the extremely prestigious warrior chief, Huayan. Moreover, many of the Black Fire barbarians quickly discovered that the strongest and most elite warriors who had followed Huayan on this expedition, the barbarians who could be said to be the foundation of the Black Fire tribe's military strength, did not seem to have any objections. Not only that, when that strange atmosphere spread, almost all the Black Fire warriors stood behind Huayan and the black-robed priest, intentionally or unintentionally. That's right, apart from Huayan, there was also the black-robed priest. Every single Black Fire warrior looked at that black figure with awe that they had never felt before. However, rules that had been ingrained in the hearts of the people for thousands of years could not be easily overturned. Ordinary Black Fire tribesmen were intimidated by these powerful people, but in the Black Fire tribe, there were people of higher status who were not afraid of them. That person quickly walked out and stood in front of all the Black Fire tribesmen. The wrinkles brought by Nian Hua's old age were engraved on Huahu's face. His back was hunched and he was gasping for breath. Even his steps were slow. Perhaps only his eyes still maintained the firm belief of a barbarian tribe leader. His grandson, Huahu, supported him by his side. Then, he looked at the captives who had been brought to his tribe's camp with a complicated and slightly angry expression. In the end, he turned all his disgust into hatred and glared at the person standing beside his father. Lu Chen, of course, noticed the gaze of the barbarian youth, Huahu. Lu Chen only felt that it was a little funny to see that strange but hateful gaze. He could more or less understand the feelings of this barbarian youth called Huahu, but he was not apologetic at all. A long time ago, when he was just a youth about the same age as Huahu, under the tutelage of that bald and burly deity stage cultivator, he had already cast aside his weak and compassionate heart. Perhaps after many years, his experience had enriched, and his temperament had also changed, but that was only for friends he had met by chance in the human race. As for the southern wilderness, he still did not have the slightest bit of soft-heartedness. Therefore, he turned a blind eye to Huahu's angry gaze, and even took out the white bone mask from his bosom in a slightly provocative manner, and slowly put it on his face. After entering the Black Fire tribe's camp, the former Divine Wood tribesmen, who had betrayed their ancestors and were forced to join the enemy tribe, seemed very frightened. Looking at the strange and hostile gazes around them, the panic and bewilderment that had been suppressed in their hearts seemed to be on the verge of exploding. Who would believe the barbarians who had betrayed the beliefs of their ancestors? If it were him, he would not believe it either. So, what would be waiting for him? The unpredictability and fear of death could drive a person insane. Therefore, the women tightly hugged their crying children with tears in their eyes, while the men clenched their fists and gritted their teeth. The clamorous noise drifted out from the crowd, increasing the vigilance and hostility of the surrounding Black Fire tribe clansmen. The atmosphere in the camp gradually became tense. It was also at this time that Lu Chen put on the white bone mask. Under the sunlight, Lu Chen looked like the shadow of a demon at this moment, contrasting with the gloomy white bone mask, making him look even more terrifying. But for some reason, when the white bone mask appeared on his face, perhaps because they suddenly saw a token passed down by their ancient ancestors, or perhaps because they remembered the promise made by the black-robed priest, the restless Divine Wood tribesmen slowly calmed down. So in the end, everyone's eyes once again fell on the center of the camp. There, Hua Ying supported his grandfather Huahu, and opposite them stood Huayan and Lu Chen side by side. The three generations of the Black Fire tribe were the symbols and leaders of the Black Fire tribe. With the addition of a black shadow beside them, at this moment, there seemed to be a faint confrontation. The barbarians of the Black Fire tribe looked at this scene with complicated expressions, and Huayan's expression did not look good either. After a moment, he stepped forward and bowed to his father, saying, "Father, I've returned." Huahu nodded his head and looked at him with a complicated expression, then swept his gaze over Lu Chen who was standing beside him. After a moment of silence he asked, "What's going on?" Hua Yan had no intention of hiding anything. He raised his head and in front of everyone, he clearly explained the ins and outs of the matter. Finally, he looked at Hua Hu with bright eyes and said, "Father, from today onwards, these people are the people of our Black Fire tribe." The surrounding Black Fire tribe members were deathly silent. No one spoke, and no one even dared to breathe loudly. Even Hua Ying, who was standing beside Hua Hu, had a change in expression. He looked at his father, who was once the most imposing and upright person in his heart, with his mouth half open, as if he did not know what to say. After a while, Hua Hu suddenly sneered and said, "Nonsense." After these two words were said, it immediately caused a commotion in the surrounding crowd. This was the judgment of the current chief of the Black Fire tribe, and he directly denied what Hua Yan had just said. His attitude and expression were exceptionally clear, leaving no room for refutation. "This is nonsense, this is nonsense." Hua Hu raised his voice and shouted, "If you are not a descendant of our Black Fire tribe, then you have no right to become a barbarian of the Black Fire tribe. What right do you have to act so recklessly and take in so many people of different races at once? Are you not afraid of the wrath of the fire god and the punishment of the ancestors?" Following his harsh words, the other people of the Black Fire tribe seemed to be wavering, and their expressions became somewhat hesitant. The Divine Wood tribe members were once again frightened and panicked, and the scene immediately became somewhat chaotic. Whispers could be heard, as if something was about to happen. But at this moment, a voice suddenly came from the side, suppressing all the noise. "Right? Who has the right to judge whether the fire god is angry or not? And who has the right to listen to the thoughts of the Black Fire tribe's ancestors? Is it you?" In an instant, all the voices in the Black Fire tribe disappeared, and countless gazes fell on the source of the voice. They saw the black-robed priest wearing a white bone mask take a step forward, staring at the old chief and lightly say, "If I remember correctly, the only ones who have the right to judge these matters should be the chief priests of our tribe." Chapter 321. It was so quiet in the Black Fire tribe's camp that one could hear a pin drop. Everyone's faces were cold and stunned. The only difference was that most of the Black Fire clan members were shocked and worried, while many of the Divine Wood clan members who had been exterminated and captured had expressions of joy on their faces. Even though the terrifying black-robed priest was the biggest culprit behind the destruction of the Divine Wood tribe, and even though they still hated this black-robed man not long ago, in this sudden internal strife of the Black Fire tribe, many of these captives who were in an awkward situation and could not even control their own lives secretly sided with Lu Chen. Humans were complicated and strange. Perhaps it was because Lu Chen was the only person in this hateful Black Fire tribe who had promised to let them live. Or perhaps it was simply because Lu Chen once wore the white bone mask passed down by the Divine Wood tribe's ancestors that they subconsciously felt a sense of familiarity with him. But no matter what, no one here cared about the thoughts of these captives at this moment. After Lu Chen bluntly said such straightforward words that almost hit the nail on the head, the atmosphere instantly became so cold that it was almost on the verge of exploding. The old chief of the Black Fire tribe looked as if his entire face was twisted. Perhaps for many years, no one had dared to speak to him like this, and no one had dared to challenge his authority in such a straightforward manner. Even Hua Yan, who was the successor of the next generation that he had groomed, had always treated him with great respect even when he had some disagreements with him. He had never been so bold before. However, all of this wasn't important at all. Even though these so-called offenses anger, and so on made the aged fire tiger furious, under his twisted and furious expression, his heart was slowly turning cold and sinking. Because what the human male, the black-robed priest, had said was correct. As the chief of the tribe, Fire Tiger could not be more clear about the correctness of Lu Chen's words. Yes, every word he said was correct. Those were the rules of the Black Fire tribe that had been passed down from ancient times to the present, from countless generations of their ancestors. The priest was the soul of the Black Fire tribe, not the patriarch. Even though the Black Fire tribe had been declining for many years and had not had a priest for at least hundreds of years, rules were rules. The rules left by the gods and ancestors had never been changed. "You! How dare you speak to me like that?" After a long while, Fire Tiger seemed to have awoken from his huge shock. His face was filled with anger as he looked at Lu Chen and roared. Lu Chen continued to stare at the elderly clan leader. He saw the changes in his expression and the flicker in his eyes. At this moment, He laughed coldly in his heart. Just as he was about to speak again, a tall figure suddenly blocked his way. That was Fire Rock. As expected in the end, were these two still father and son? Lu Chen narrowed his eyes and stared at Hua Yan's back. Hua Yan stood motionless, but for some reason, his back seemed to tremble slightly. Perhaps it was because he felt a little cold. However, his face was still looking forward, looking at his father and son who were in a state of rage. Perhaps Fire Tiger could still barely control his emotions, but it seemed as if the young Fire Hawk could no longer endure it. His eyes had already turned red, and a beast-like roar came from his throat. It seemed as if Lu Chen's provocation towards Fire Tiger had completely infuriated him. Thus, even with Hua Yan standing between them, Fire Hawk was still unable to endure it. Hua Yan noticed Fire Hawk's appearance and frowned. Just as he was about to stop him, Fire Hawk suddenly roared and pulled out a blade from his waist. Then, like all the warriors of the Black Fire tribe, he roared and rushed forward, swinging his blade at Lu Chen. At the same time he shouted, "Bold bastard, how dare you speak to your grandfather like that? I'll cut you to death." The blade cut through the sky, bringing with it a trace of coldness. The entire situation seemed to be about to escalate at this moment. Lu Chen sneered, the Black Fire tribesmen were shocked, and Fire Tiger reached out to pull him back but was unable to. All the warriors of the Black Fire tribe, without exception, stood in place without moving. No one stopped Fire Hawk, but no one rushed out to help him either. For a moment, Fire Tiger seemed to have sensed something. His gaze swept across the surroundings, and his expression became more and more unsightly. Hua Yan snorted coldly and frowned. His body moved slightly, looking like he wanted to go forward and stop his son. However, at this moment, everyone in the camp suddenly heard the shrill howl of a wolf. A black shadow suddenly scuttled out from Lu Chen's side like a bolt of lightning, instantly pouncing on the Fire Hawk who had just drawn his blade and charged over with lightning speed, instantly pinning him to the ground. That was Black Wolf Atsu. The huge wolf body seemed to directly crush the youth's resistance, and Atsu easily pushed him to the ground. Then, with a roar, it opened its bloody mouth with sharp fangs and directly bit down on Fire Hawk's throat. Everyone's expression changed. No matter what, Fire Hawk was still the grandson of Chief Hua Hu and the only son of the next chief, Hua Yan. For a moment, only a series of whooshing sounds could be heard. Finally, 7 or 8 figures rushed out and pounced on Atsu. But it looked like it was too late. In the blink of an eye, those huge fangs had already bitten Fire Hawk's neck. At this moment, Hua Yan suddenly turned around and shouted at Lu Chen, "Stop! Stop!" Almost at the same time, Lu Chen also shouted to stop Atsu. Atsu's movement stopped at this critical moment, but its sharp fangs did not leave Fire Hawk, whose face had already turned as pale as paper. It pounced on Fire Hawk's body, and then glanced at Lu Chen from the corner of its eye. Lu Chen ignored it. He did not speak, nor did he make any movements. He only looked indifferently at the burly barbarian in front of him. After a moment he said, "What do you want to do?" Hua Yan gritted his teeth. After a moment he said in a low voice, word by word, "He is my son." Lu Chen did not speak, and only quietly looked at him. Hua Yan's gaze also met his without flinching. Just like this, after an unknown amount of time, Lu Chen slowly nodded, then took a step forward and walked past Hua Yan. When he reached Hua Yan's side, he waved his hand. Atsu growled and finally let go of the barbarian youth. It trotted all the way back to Hua Yan's side. At the same time, Lu Chen used a voice that only Hua Yan could hear and said, "He is your son, but he just attacked a tribal priest. Do you still remember the consequences of this kind of reckless behavior a few hundred years ago?" Hua Yan silently stood where he was. His expression was abnormally ugly, but he did not say anything. He only watched as Lu Chen walked away. The conflict within the Black Fire tribe suddenly stopped, and then the entire tribe camp seemed to have regained its peaceful and joyful atmosphere. However, whether it was the Black Fire tribe members or the large number of Divine Wood captives, they could all feel the faint undercurrent under the calm surface. Everyone dispersed, and then there were people who came forward to settle down the Divine Wood captives. Although someone had previously promised to let them join the Black Fire tribe, it was obviously not a good time to bring this up. After the sky turned dark, in the northeast corner of the camp, in a stone house that had been specially cleared out, Atu the Black Wolf laid at the door, while Lu Chen leaned against the window, looking at the moon that had just risen in the night sky. Apart from the two of them, there was another person in the house. It was Huayan. He was sitting not far from Lu Chen, looking somewhat silent. Lu Chen retracted his gaze from the slowly rising moon and looked at Huayan, saying, "What are you thinking about?" Huayan was silent for a moment, then said, "Why did you deliberately do that in front of the entire tribe?" Lu Chen lightly said, "According to the rules of your tribe, I am now a priest. What do you think a tribal priest would have done in that kind of situation?" Huayan did not speak. Lu Chen sneered, saying, "If it was any other priest or shaman in the history of the Black Fire tribe, if they met someone who dared to offend them like today, then your son would already be a dead man." He waved his hand, saying calmly, "You know, I was lenient because of you." Huayan said with some difficulty, "You have to give them a little more time, so that they can accept these things now." "What you and I lack the most is time," Lu Chen said bluntly. "I did what I did because I had no other choice." Huayan said, "But if you continue to be so strong with such powerful witchcraft, sooner or later, your prestige in the tribe will even surpass mine." Lu Chen stared at him, and after a moment said, "You are starting to worry about me?" Huayan was silent for a long time, then slowly nodded, saying, "Yes. I never thought that in the cultivation of the Black Fire spiritual power, you would advance so much in such a short time." He looked up at Lu Chen, saying, "With your intelligence and the Black Fire witchcraft, I think it won't be long before the Black Fire tribe is completely under your control. Am I right?" He looked at Lu Chen, saying word by word. Chapter 322. The room was very quiet. Neither Lu Chen nor Huayan spoke for a long time. Atsu's huge body completely blocked the door. It didn't look like a monster, but more like an overfed dog. It glanced at the people in the room tiredly and yawned. It seemed to be bored and slowly narrowed its eyes. "Do you know what you're saying?" Lu Chen looked at Huayan and said calmly, "You're actually worried that a human will steal the entire Black Fire tribe?" Huayan shook his head and said, "You're not a normal human. You're now the messenger of the fire god, the priest of our Black Fire tribe. For thousands of years, we barbarians have long been used to obeying the orders of shamans and priests. As long as you truly gain the respect of the entire tribe, then they will definitely listen to your orders, and from then on, obtain supreme power." "Then what do I want this power for?" Lu Chen suddenly interrupted him and asked Huayan. Huayan was silent. Lu Chen laughed coldly and said, "Don't forget, from beginning to end, it was you who dragged me into this. I have no interest in your barbarian games or things like reviving glory. How about this? If you're really worried, then tell me how to return to the north. I'll immediately leave this place and let your Black Fire tribe sleep peacefully. How about that?" Huayan thought for a while, then looked very seriously at Lu Chen and said, "You can't leave." Lu Chen rolled his eyes and said unhappily, "If I didn't know that you're a fanatic believer of the fire god, then no matter how I force you, it'll be useless. Otherwise, I would really want to cast a Black Fire curse on you and let you have a taste of that." Although Huayan was brave, he couldn't help but frown when he heard those words. He looked at Lu Chen with a complicated expression and said after a moment of hesitation, "Speaking of which, didn't you make a promise to the Divine Wood tribe that you would personally guarantee their fate? Why do you want to leave this place so soon? Have you ever thought that after you leave, won't they all fall into a miserable fate after being abandoned by you? In this way, isn't it breaking your oath? What's there to be afraid of? When I swore that day, I only talked about the Black Fire tribe, not myself," Lu Chen replied calmly. Huayan was momentarily speechless. After which, he looked at Lu Chen's expression and bitterly laughed for a moment. However, he shook his head and said, "Forget it, let's not talk about this. There's something I need to discuss with you." Lu Chen said, "What is it? Speak." Huayan said, "You are now an official priest of our Black Fire tribe." Please don't say that." Lu Chen waved his hand and said, "Your father, the current chief of the Black Fire tribe, hasn't acknowledged me yet. My position isn't stable. Who knows, I might be removed in 2 or 3 days." Huayan sighed and said, "My father still can't understand our thoughts and methods for now. But don't worry, as long as I'm here, he will always stand on your side. Moreover, I don't believe that you can't see that after the battle at the Divine Wood camp, the strongest and most elite warriors of our tribe have already accepted you. They are especially respectful towards you. Lu Chen laughed and said, "That's because they received more women and servants after the battle, right? That's also because your witchcraft is so powerful. We, the barbarians of the southern wilderness, are born to respect the strong." Lu Chen smiled and didn't say anything. Hua Yan continued, "As for my father, you don't have to worry about him. I will often go over to discuss these matters with him. No matter what, it is the will of the fire god to cooperate with you. I have no doubt about this. No matter what, I will carry this matter to the end." Lu Chen looked deeply at him. A strange light seemed to flash in the depths of his eyes. Hua Yan paused for a moment, then said to Lu Chen, "Let's not talk about these troublesome matters first. But I have discovered that you seem to be missing one person." Lu Chen was startled and said, "Missing who?" Hua Yan said, "Missing someone to serve you. You are now a priest of the tribe. Your identity and status are different from others. You should find someone to help you with the daily chores of cleaning the house and preparing meals." No need, it's too troublesome." Lu Chen immediately shook his head and wanted to decline. But Hua Yan's expression was resolute. He stood up and walked out. At the same time he said, "Leave this matter to me. I will help you find a satisfactory and hard-working person. You don't have to worry about this." How could Lu Chen not care? He spent his days alone with the Atsu. He wasn't afraid of any secret matters being leaked. If there was suddenly a barbarian by his side, wouldn't his hands and feet be tied? But Hua Yan seemed to be an impatient person. After saying those words, he strode out of the house. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared. Lu Chen chased to the door. When he looked outside, he could no longer see Hua Yan's back. Lu Chen looked up at the sky. After a moment, he spat out a mouthful of impure air. He smiled bitterly and said, "Forget it, let's leave it be." Hua Yan fulfilled his promise the next morning. He brought the person he wanted to the door of the stone house that Lu Chen lived in. Last night, the mysterious and terrifying black-robed priest didn't seem to do anything strange. He just sat quietly under the wall of the house. His big black wolf was still loyally lying on the ground in front of the door, watching the people coming and going in the camp. For thousands of years, Lu Chen was the first human to come to the southern wilderness. So Hua Yan certainly couldn't find another human to serve him. So the person that Hua Yan brought over this morning was a barbarian. It was a female barbarian. She looked to be about 18 or 19 years old. She was still very young, but her expression seemed to be full of grief. When she looked at Lu Chen, her gaze seemed to be very complicated. It seemed that she was thinking about how to avenge the deaths of her clansmen. How to secretly get rid of this incomparably cruel black-robed priest. Lu Chen stared at the woman for a while. Then he turned around and walked to Hua Yan's side. He glared at him and sneered. "Are you afraid that I won't die fast enough?" Hua Yan heard this and said, "How could there be such a thing?" Lu Chen pointed at the young body that was kneeling on the ground and sneered. "This woman is clearly a young woman that no one in the Divine Wood tribe has claimed. Why did you send her to me? What do you want?" "Let her serve you." Hua Yan laughed loudly. Then he waved his hand and turned around to leave. Lu Chen was somewhat helpless. He was about to say something when he turned around and looked at the young barbarian. He sighed and asked, "What is your name?" "My name is Yi." Chapter 323. Yezi was a barbarian girl. Because she was young, her skin looked better than most of the barbarians in the wilderness. However, there were still obvious characteristics of the barbarians on her body. For example, there were sharp fangs protruding from the corners of her mouth, tattoos on her body, and she was actually quite tall. When Lu Chen called her up, he found that this barbarian girl was almost as tall as him. In fact, from the aesthetic point of view of the human race, most people would not be able to accept barbarian women. However, it was probably because of her young age. In general, this woman named Yezi seemed to be more pleasing to the eye than the ferocious barbarians outside. Compared to those barbarians who like to have their faces covered with twisted patterns and talisman tattoos, Ye's exposed skin only had 2 tattoos on her upper left arm and right thigh. This was also the reason why she looked more delicate. However, having been in the Black Fire tribe for so long, Lu Chen roughly knew some of the barbarians' customs. It was not that Yezi did not want to have those colorful tattoos on her face, but because those tattoos on the face often meant boasting, meritorious deeds, achievements, or other qualifications. It was not something that could be casually tattooed on. It was probably because this barbarian girl was too young and not qualified enough. While Lu Chen was sizing up the barbarian girl, Yezi was also secretly looking at him. The women of the tribe were still more gentle than the aggressive male warriors. In her eyes, there was a bit of awe and curiosity, but it seemed to be mixed with a bit of resentment. Lu Chen quickly noticed this. He did not have any intention of guessing, but directly asked Yezi about her origin and identity. Yezi lowered her head and said. Just as Lu Chen had guessed, Yezi was a member of the Divine Wood tribe who had surrendered after their tribe was exterminated. Would he let a woman who had a grudge against him, and who might even have relatives who died in the war started by Lu Chen by his side? Hua Yan's burly and brave figure flashed in front of Lu Chen's eyes. He thought to himself, what is this guy, whose mind is far more detailed and profound than the other barbarians, thinking? Did he have some ulterior motive, or was it simply because it was convenient? Currently, the atmosphere within the Black Fire tribe was rather delicate. Patriarch Huahu was clearly dissatisfied with Huayan and Lu Chen's actions. Despite Huahu's advanced age, many of the tribe's warriors stood on the side of Huayan and Lu Chen. However, he had been the chief of the tribe for many years after all. He was a person of virtue and prestige, and no one could ignore him. Not to mention that Huahu was Huayan's father after all. They were related by blood, so ordinary people could not do anything to him. Even in the barbarian tribes, which were known for their ferocity and savagery, it was not popular for the sons to go against their elders, or for the sons to fall out with their fathers and even fight with them. Under such circumstances, it might not be convenient for Huayan to directly call for a tribesman from the Black Fire tribe to serve Lu Chen. Instead, he would not need to be courteous with the Divine Tree captives, and would be able to account to the Black Fire tribe. As for what Lu Chen had said before about giving these people equal treatment, let's just wait and see. Probably not many people would take it seriously. Lu Chen pondered in silence, while Yi just stood there. She did not dare to move until she received the orders of this mysterious and terrifying priest. Just like that, after an unknown period of time, Lu Chen suddenly withdrew his gaze and looked at her again. "Come here," he said calmly, but his tone seemed to have an unquestionable aura. Yi lowered her head and responded, slowly walking in front of him. Like most of the barbarians, Ye's clothes were mainly animal skins, supplemented by small stones of various shapes and colors, animal teeth, and small bones as ornaments. The harsh sandstorm on the wilderness did not seem to have damaged the beauty and youth of this barbarian girl. The exposed skin on her arms and thighs was still fair. But not far in front of her, the man stood in front of her like a mass of darkness. One black and one white, the shadow and the light, juxtaposed in such a somewhat dazzling way in the stone house. But at least at this moment, Ye's whiteness looked particularly small and fragile. In front of the threatening dark aura, or because of the awe she had for the shaman and the priest since she was a child, even if she still held a trace of resentment in her heart, Yi could not help but kneel down. She was just an ordinary barbarian girl. She did not have the powerful force of the barbarian warriors. She was weak and ordinary. Not to mention that even the barbarian warriors, who were known for their ferocity and toughness, were in awe of this shadow-like man. After a moment, Yi suddenly felt a chill on the top of her head. It was a hand that was gently placed on the top of her head. Why was the palm so cold, almost not like the flesh and blood of a human? At that moment, Yi even trembled for no reason. She closed her eyes and was very afraid. She even felt that it was not a hand that was pressing on her head, but a piece of gloomy white bone. "Do you hate me in your heart?" That calm, seemingly emotionless voice sounded in Ye's ears. Yi was stunned for a moment, and then immediately shook her head desperately. She was afraid that if she moved a little slower, this terrible and evil priest might make her suffer the most terrible punishment in the legends. Lu Chen looked at the terrified barbarian girl and wanted to say something, but after a moment, he secretly sighed in his heart. He thought to himself, "What's going on? Didn't he say that he was indifferent to these barbarians and had no interest in them? Why did he suddenly feel that his heart had softened?" He withdrew his hand, turned around, and walked back to his original place and sat down. After a moment, she heard him say, "This time, you probably know the people of the Divine Wood clan who came with you, right?" Yi breathed a sigh of relief after his hand left her head, but after hearing this, she became a little nervous. At the same time, she had a faint feeling that the fate of her clan was about to be decided. She hesitated for a moment and then said carefully, "I know them all, Lord Priest. What do you want to do?" Lu Chen raised his head slightly and looked at her. Yi was shocked and quickly prostrated on the ground saying, "Lord Priest, don't be angry. I just want to help you. Now, I have been sent to serve you. No matter what, you can ask me to do it, and I will do my best to do it." Roar! Lu Chen did not make any response, but at this moment, a low roar suddenly came from behind Yi. A huge shadow suddenly appeared and covered her, with a strong murderous aura. Leaf screamed and turned her head. What she saw was a bloody mouth, and then a huge ferocious wolf head. The sharp fangs were about to pierce her face, and a pair of big eyes like copper bells were staring at her fiercely. It seemed that the next moment, it would pounce on her and swallow her in one bite. Ye's body went limp, and she almost fainted. Her body could not help but curl back desperately. After a while, she reacted. Wasn't this the huge black wolf that had been following the mysterious priest? Before, it was already very frightening, but now that it was so close to the giant wolf, its ferocious and terrifying aura was even more frightening. He had no doubt that this demon wolf must have killed countless people and eaten countless flesh and blood. Could it be that the purpose of me being placed next to this priest was to become the wolf's food? There was no trace of blood on the barbarian girl's face, and she looked like she was about to be scared to death. At this moment, Lu Chen frowned and said, "Enough, Atsu, you're too free, aren't you?" The huge black wolf that was baring its fangs and looking like the most terrifying monster in the world suddenly shrank back. Its original ferocious appearance disappeared in the blink of an eye, and then it returned to its lazy appearance. It grinned and called out, then slowly walked to Lu Chen's side and lay down. It opened its mouth and yawned, but it rested its head on Lu Chen's leg, and then narrowed its eyes again. Yi, who felt that she had escaped from death, slowly recovered after a long while. She gasped and once again knelt on the ground in front of Lu Chen with some difficulty. Lu Chen looked at her helplessly. After a moment of silence he said, "Are you all right?" Yi whispered in a trembling voice. I'm fine." Lu Chen sighed and said, "If you're tired, you can go back and have a rest for a while." Yi shook her head and said, "The leader who led me here just now said that I will be your servant from now on. From today on, I will eat, drink, and live here. I can't go anywhere." Lu Chen was speechless for a moment. After a moment he said, "Then do as you please." Yi bowed her head and agreed. After a while she looked around again, and then quietly got up and walked to the side to start cleaning up the house. Lu Chen didn't care about her. Anyway, there was nothing important in this house. After waiting for a while, he suddenly seemed to think of something, and then asked Yi casually, "By the way, among your people this time, how many warriors or adult men are there who can fight?" Ye's body trembled, and her face suddenly turned pale. Lu Chen waited for a while, but found that he didn't get the answer he wanted. He frowned and looked at her. "What's wrong with you?" Yi suddenly ran over, knelt in front of Lu Chen, and then kowtowed desperately. Her eyes were full of tears and she cried, Your Excellency, I beg you to let my people go. As long as you don't let them die, I'm willing to do whatever you want you to do." With that, she seemed to have made a difficult decision. She suddenly put her hand on her animal skin clothes, and was about to tear them off. Chapter 324. With a crisp sound, Yezi exerted her strength and directly tore off more than half of her animal skin clothes. Lu Chen only felt a sudden flash of white light in front of his eyes. At that moment, even a calm and steady person like him was dumbfounded. He stared at Yezi with her mouth half open. For a moment, he was stunned and didn't know what to say or do. He just sat there motionlessly. Atsu, who was originally a little lazy beside Lu Chen, seemed to be shocked. With a quiver, he turned over and jumped up. He looked up at Yezi, who had suddenly revealed half of her body. He stared at her with a pair of dog eyes and didn't make a sound for a long time. The atmosphere in the stone house instantly fell into silence. Yezi closed her eyes tightly, her cheeks flushed. Her heart was shy and indignant, and there was also a kind of desperation, as if she was sacrificing herself for justice. However, after waiting for a long time, she suddenly woke up from her inexplicable emotions, but found that it seemed that the expected thing did not happen. Almost all of the barbarian tribes in the wilderness were dominated by men and women. Especially the barbarian women who had been defeated, captured, and turned into female slaves. They had no dignity to speak of. They were often reduced to the playthings of their new masters, or become tools to give birth to future generations. In fact, as long as the barbarian women who fell into such a situation did not want to die, they often hoped to have children. As long as they had offspring, then for the sake of the children, their situation would be improved, or at least they could get a relatively formal identity. In Yezi's original expectation, she was ready to give up her dignity and sacrifice her body. Under normal circumstances, if the opponent was a barbarian, he would most likely have rushed over to push her down and ravage her. But the strange thing was that this situation did not happen now. She stood there, feeling that her surroundings seemed to be empty. No one was approaching, and there was no sound. There was only a trace of wind passing over her white skin, bringing a slight chill. Yezi opened her eyes and found that the black-robed priest in front of her had turned around. Instead, his huge black wolf pet was still staring at her. Its pair of fierce eyes were full of surprise and doubt. "Sir." Yi didn't know what was wrong with this mysterious and terrifying black-robed priest. Why didn't he act like a normal barbarian man? Could it be that he was a great and terrifying priest who possessed the power of the legendary black fire witchcraft, so he was different from the other barbarians? But, as a man, his physiological structure should be the same and normal as the barbarians. Ye's imagination began to run wild. At the same time, he was a little shocked and afraid. He was worried that if his actions did not tempt the priest, and instead angered him, wouldn't it bring a great disaster to his clansmen? Thinking of this, Yi felt her legs turn to jelly. It had to be admitted that Yi was not a very knowledgeable and capable barbarian. In fact, she was just an ordinary barbarian girl in the Divine Wood tribe. At most, her beauty and skin were passable, but she had grown up in the tribe and only knew some basic rules of the barbarian world. Given time, if nothing had changed, she would have found the strongest and bravest warrior in the tribe and married him. Then, she would serve him wholeheartedly and bear his children. When her husband went to war, she would worry and pray for him. When he returned safely, she would be filled with joy. She would work hard day and night, living an ordinary life. Until one night this year, when the terrifying shadow of the black-robed priest covered the sky and the sun. When the terrifying shadow demon descended from the sky, the Black Fire tribe was invaded by the witchcraft warriors. Then, the Divine Wood tribe, which had lasted for many years, perished. She and many other clansmen became the black-robed priest's captives. She should have hated him. In fact, deep down in her heart, she still loathed and hated this person. However, fear was a stronger emotion in her heart. That night, it overwhelmed everything else. She didn't even dare to have any thoughts of hatred in front of this man. According to the legends, the shamans and priests were omnipotent, and some could even read people's minds. How is he going to deal with me? It's fine if I die, but don't drag others down with me. Just when Yezi's mind was in a mess and all kinds of distracting thoughts came one after another, Lu Chen coughed softly and said, "You, put on your clothes first." Yezi was stunned for a moment. She was a little embarrassed at first, but then she felt a burst of joy in her heart. From the tone of the priest, it seemed that he wasn't angry. However, it was said that these big shots were temperamental. No one could be sure what they would do in the next moment. Yezi hurriedly agreed, and then hurriedly put on the animal skin clothes that she had just torn off. The only thing that was a little awkward was that the animal skin clothes were originally sewn. Just now, she had the determination to tear it apart regardless of everything. Even if she died here today, it didn't matter at all, so when she tore it, she didn't even think about what to do if she had to wear it again later. She saw that the animal skin clothes had been directly torn in half. No matter how Yezi tried to cover it, it was not secure. Either the front part fell off, or the back part was exposed. In the end, Yezi had no choice but to take off the two pieces of animal skin from the front and back with a red face. She directly tied them together with a knot, and then tied them above her chest, regardless of the part above her waist. Only then did she barely cover her body, and it was not too ugly. However, in this way, her petite figure was even more alluring. Lu Chen, who turned around and saw this scene, rolled his eyes in his heart. He thought that it was fortunate that this barbarian girl had a barbarian face and two small fangs that were similar to that of a beast. Otherwise, the temptation was really not small. But in any case, even if Lu Chen was not a gentleman for so many years, and had done many shady things, he still had no interest in a barbarian woman. So after glancing at Yezi's exquisite body, he turned his eyes away, frowned and said to Yezi, "I just want to ask, how many warriors are left in your tribe now? Why do you look like the sky is falling down?" Yezi's eyes were red, and there were faint tears in them. She knelt on the ground again and said, "I beg you, Your Excellency, please let my people go." Lu Chen sighed, walked to her and sat down, saying, "What are you thinking in your heart? Tell me clearly." Yezi hesitated for a moment, but still lowered her head and said, "It turned out that in the southern wilderness, because the barbarians were fierce and warlike, there were often tribal wars in the past. Since there was war, there was naturally blood, death, and captives. The barbarians were not polite to the captives. With their fierce nature, one could easily imagine the fate of those captives. The women could be divided up like property. If the men were not tortured to death, they would be forced to do some extremely dangerous work. Or they would be forced to charge at the front lines in the next battle. They would be used as cannon fodder to exhaust the enemy's strength." Yezi naturally knew these things. In fact, she did not have much hope, but on the night of the extinction of the tribe, Lu Chen gave them hope, saying that they should be treated equally and become a part of the Black Fire tribe. This was naturally very different from the treatment of captives in most barbarians' minds. But it was this little bit of hope, coupled with the oppression of the tragic fate of their families, that led to so many people being forced to surrender. Yezi had just heard Lu Chen's words, not including women and children, but only the number of adult men. This immediately triggered the most terrifying thought in her heart, and she immediately lost control. After listening to the barbarian girl lying on the ground in front of him, intermittently sobbing from time to time, Lu Chen did not know whether to laugh or cry. He shook his head and said with a wry smile, "You've misunderstood. I didn't mean that." Yezi's body stiffened, and she immediately raised her head to look at the black-robed priest. Her eyes were filled with surprise, and it seemed that even the hidden hatred seemed to have faded a lot. Lu Chen waved his hand and said, "I have no intention of going back on what I said to you. As long as I am here, I will naturally do it. You can also say these words to your people when you go back." Yezi nodded repeatedly and said, I will. Thank you, Your Excellency, thank you." Lu Chen snorted and said, "Now you should be relieved. Now can you tell me how many men there are in your Divine Wood tribe?" Yezi did not answer directly. She looked a little hesitant. Lu Chen said with some amusement, "Do you have a brain or not? I'm just asking you in passing. Do you think I won't know if you don't tell me? Believe it or not, I can go out and find a few leaders of the Black Fire tribe and ask them directly." Yezi thought that it was true, and immediately became a little discouraged. She could only say with some embarrassment, "About 40 people." Lu Chen was a little surprised, but then he understood. Of course, not all of them were the warriors of the Divine Wood tribe in the past. There should be a lot of them just to make up the numbers. He pondered for a moment and waved his hand, saying, "Go and call those men over." Yezi was a little worried again, but after seeing Lu Chen's expression, she did not dare to say anything more. She could only agree and go out. And after watching her leave, Lu Chen subconsciously felt a sense of relief. The burst of dazzling white just now was dazzling. It was really rare to see a barbarian woman with such good skin. At this moment, Hei Lang suddenly let out a low growl. Lu Chen glanced at it and said, "What are you doing? Behave." Atsu looked at him with a look of contempt. Lu Chen coughed dryly and turned around, saying, "I was stunned just now." "Stunned? Do you understand?" "I was stunned, so I didn't mean to stare." Roar. Lu Chen ignored it and walked slowly to the side. Then he muttered in a low voice, "I didn't expect it to be so big." Chapter 325. When Yezi came out of the mysterious black-robed priest's house, she was seen by many people in the Black Fire tribe's camp. Then, almost everyone saw her disheveled appearance. It couldn't be helped. When she went in, she was wearing a complete set of clothes from her neck to her waist, but when she came out, she could only barely cover her chest. Even if one were to say that nothing had happened, one would have to believe it. However, perhaps because of Lu Chen's recent reputation, and the fact that the barbarians generally revered the priest, no one really stepped forward or loudly discussed anything. Everyone just watched the barbarian girl walk away with complicated emotions, and then began to whisper to each other. Of course, Yezi could feel the strange gazes of the people around her. She blushed again and felt a little annoyed. But when she looked down at her torn clothes that could only be tied together, she could only walk away silently. These clothes were torn by him. If he had to blame someone, he really didn't know who to blame. Just like that, she walked quickly with her head down, and soon returned to the place where the Black Fire tribe had settled the Divine Wood tribe captives. After being exterminated, they became captives under someone else's roof, and even their survival depended on the mood of others. The Divine Wood tribe members here were naturally very sensitive. The news that Hua Yan had come to pick Yezi and give her to Lu Chan as a maid had already spread throughout the Divine Wood tribe. So when they saw Yezi suddenly return, a large group of people immediately surrounded her. Most of the people walking in front were women, and most of them were slightly older. There were 1 or 2 old men beside them, and it seemed that they had some experience or reputation among the Divine Wood tribe members. These people obviously wanted to ask Yezi if there was any progress outside, and if the black-robed priest intended to keep his promise. But soon, everyone's eyes suddenly fell on Yezi. Looking at the girl who was still fully clothed when she left in the morning, and now revealing her fair waist and smooth and alluring shoulders, while her clothes only covered her chest, many people's gazes immediately changed. After a moment of silence, a group of women rushed forward and squeezed the other old men and men to the back, surrounding Yezi tightly in the middle. In an instant, countless questions rushed into Yezi's ears. Yezi, what happened to you? Did that priest sleep with you? Poor child, that beast must be very fierce. Look, even his clothes have been torn in half. Does your body hurt? How pitiful. Come over here. Auntie will give you a hug. Yezi felt her head buzzing and almost dizzy, but she still heard some of the questions in the noise. She quickly replied, No, I'm fine. I really didn't. Sigh, such a good girl, she should have been married to our tribe's warriors and given birth to our children. Who would have thought that she would be defiled by the Black Fire tribe's bastards? Before Yezi could finish her words, she was interrupted by a wave of comforting voices filled with sadness, pity, and heartache. The barbarian aunties around her kept comforting her, pushing her around and holding her in their arms, telling her not to be sad, not to be sad. This was inevitable for a woman in her life, and it didn't matter if she was bitten by a dog when she went out for a walk. Moreover, now that the Sacred Wood tribe had fallen into such a miserable state, they could only depend on the Black Fire tribe. The black-robed priest's position in the Black Fire tribe was not to be underestimated. Having a woman serve him was a good thing for everyone. At first, Yezi wanted to continue to argue, but after being interrupted several times and hearing the words of the people around her, she suddenly lowered her head, and her eyes were a little red. It was still noisy around her. Everyone seemed to be comforting her. Later, a few respectable elderly people squeezed in and solemnly told Yezi that they hoped she would be more open-minded and not be sad. They hoped that she would serve the black-robed priest carefully and endure any grievances. If she was sad, she could come back and tell everyone. Then it would be fine. At least in this way, everyone would be able to live a better life. Later, Yezi cried and shed tears. Surrounded by her clansmen and surrounded by seemingly warm hugs, her tears inexplicably flowed like pearls with a broken string. She couldn't stop even if she wanted to. Yezi went back to change her clothes, and then returned to the stone house where Lu Chen was. But at this moment, she was accompanied by a group of men from the Sacred Wood tribe. The barbarians of the Black Fire tribe who noticed the commotion here were quickly attracted over. After all, there were suddenly so many foreigners in the tribe's camp. Although the higher-ups had said that they would merge into one after the annexation, it didn't mean that the Black Fire tribe would accept these people of different surnames from the Sacred Wood tribe. Moreover, there didn't seem to be such an example in the southern wilderness since ancient times. Among the crowd of onlookers from the Black Fire tribe, there were many strong adult men. They were the Black Fire barbarian warriors. Although they looked at Lu Chen's stone house with awe, when they looked at the Sacred Wood tribe captives, their gazes were not very friendly. There was even some hostility and vigilance. After all, they had been fighting to the death not long ago. But what happened next was beyond most people's expectations. After Lu Chen walked out of the stone house, he didn't avoid the onlookers and directly looked at the captives. He pointed at them and eliminated about half of the old and weak, leaving about 20 of the strongest men. After that, Lu Chen returned to the stone house with the huge black wolf and Yezi. The people who were eliminated went back first, leaving the remaining 20 people standing outside the house at a loss. After a while, footsteps sounded in the stone house again, but this time it was Yezi who walked out alone. Her expression looked a little complicated, but she was generally calm. Under the gaze of the crowd, she walked towards the 20 people and pointed at one of them, asking him to follow her into the stone house. At this time, not only were the remaining people bewildered, even the onlookers from the Black Fire tribe did not understand what the black-robed priest was going to do. They all whispered to each other. But just as they were whispering to each other, an inexplicable aura suddenly emanated from the dim stone house. Although it was not as exaggerated as the sky-changing color, and although there were no abnormalities or obvious changes, everyone seemed to feel their hearts beating violently. Then, for a moment, the stone house seemed to be completely dark. It was shrouded in incomparably deep darkness, and in the deepest part of the dark shadow, there seemed to be a flame suddenly burning. No one could see the flame. It was just a feeling. Perhaps it was because the flame was black. Everyone quietened down and stared at the dark stone house. After waiting for a while, it seemed like a long time. Finally, the darkness seemed to slowly fade, and after a while, a figure slowly walked out. It was the divine wood warrior who was called in by Yezi. At this moment, the strong barbarian warrior looked a little defeated, and his expression was a little complicated. He looked a little nervous, a little worried, and a little excited. Moreover, he seemed to be relieved. All kinds of strange and contradictory feelings appeared on this barbarian at the same time. No one could figure out what he had experienced just now. And before the surrounding people could gather around to ask, another set of footsteps came from the house. Soon, the barbarian girl, Yezi, walked out again. After looking around expressionlessly, she pointed at another barbarian waiting outside and asked him to follow her in. When Yezi and the somewhat uneasy man entered the stone house again, the surrounding divine wood warriors immediately surrounded the first barbarian warrior and began to ask questions. The surrounding Black Fire tribe people also stretched their necks to get closer to them. They were also very curious. In the crowd, the barbarian warrior with a complicated expression was silent for a moment. Suddenly, he stretched out his hand and pulled open the front of his shirt, revealing his strong chest. Immediately, the surrounding people's gazes fell on his bulging muscles. Suddenly, everyone became silent. Where the crowd's line of sight could reach, there was now a totem symbol that was shaped like a blazing flame on the vital point of his chest. The totem symbol was completely black, deep and murderous, and it looked as if it would really burst into flames at any moment. That was the totem symbol of the Black Fire tribe. With the appearance of this symbol, there was a sudden uproar in the crowd further away. Several people, almost all of them warriors of the Black Fire tribe, cried out in surprise. In the middle of their foreheads, there was also the same rune. It was the same rune that Lu Chen used to cast the Black Fire witchcraft to demonize them. Chapter 326. The appearance of the Black Fire rune on the Divine Wood tribe warrior caused an even greater uproar and surprise among the Black Fire tribe compared to the group of captives. Everyone whispered to each other, anger and surprise on their faces. At the same time, a few strong barbarian warriors even turned around and ran into the distance. After a while, a group of people surrounded Hui Yan and walked over with large strides. The group of people in front quickly felt that something was wrong and quickly made way for them, including the group of Divine Wood tribe captives. Although there was still a hint of unwillingness on their faces, there was also a hint of fear on their faces. Most of them lowered their heads and retreated to the side. People who had just been exterminated and captured would never have the courage to resist. Moreover, when this group of aggressive Black Fire tribe warriors walked over, each of them looked like a fiend. At the same time, many people noticed that some of them had blades and axes hanging on their bodies, intentionally or unintentionally. In the world of the barbarians, knives and axes only had one use, and that was to kill. Hua Yan stood in front of this group of warriors with a solemn expression. His face looked a little gloomy, while the other Black Fire tribe warriors all had different expressions. There was reverence, anger, fear, and even a little worry. However, when they felt a dark aura surging out from the stone house, almost everyone stopped in their tracks. That was the power of witchcraft. Every warrior here, especially those who had experienced the battle with the Divine Wood tribe, could clearly feel it. They also understood the danger of this power more than the other tribesmen who did not know the origin of this power. Hua Yan's face was dark as he stood outside the dark door, staring into the depths of the darkness. His expression was indifferent, making it impossible for others to see what he was thinking. However, they could faintly see that the depths of his pupils were slightly contracting. After an unknown amount of time, the powerful dark aura finally faded. After a while, just like before, Yi sent out another man who had been marked with the black fire rune. She was about to point out the next person when a tall and burly figure suddenly appeared in front of her. Hua Yan's hill-like body stood in front of Yi like a giant beast. Yi subconsciously took 2 steps back, a trace of fear flashing across her face. However, Hua Yan did not pay too much attention to this barbarian girl. His gaze never left the dark stone house. At this moment, he only casually said to Yi in a low voice, "Lead the way, I want to see him." When he said this, Hua Yan's expression was not particularly fierce, but there was an inviolable aura in his tone. Yi secretly swallowed her saliva and then agreed in a low voice. She did not dare to call anyone else and just turned around to lead Hua Yan into the stone house. Following behind Hua Yan were Tai Xiong, He Niu, and a group of his trusted warriors. Seeing this, they also wanted to follow, but when Hua Yan was about to reach the doorstep, his body paused for a moment, then he turned around and suddenly ordered, "You guys wait outside." After saying this, he directly walked into the stone house without saying a word. Iron Bear, Black Bull, and the rest of the Black Fire warriors looked at each other. However, after a while, they finally spread out in 2s and 3s around the stone house. Then, intentionally or unintentionally, they surrounded the stone house and the 20 divine wood warriors outside. The moment he walked into the stone house, Hua Yan suddenly felt a feeling of darkness in front of him. After a while, when his eyes gradually adapted to the darkness, he saw a figure sitting in front of the stone house. At the same time, there was an extremely large figure lying on the ground beside him. A pair of slightly green eyes glanced at him. Needless to say, it was naturally Lu Chan and Atsu. Yi walked up nervously and hurriedly, kneeling in front of the black-robed priest. When he stammered and wanted to explain something, Lu Chen casually waved his hand and said indifferently, "No need to say anything. This is our tribe's warrior leader. He can come whenever he wants." Hua Yan's expression was grave and stern. He did not reply. Instead, he slowly walked over and stopped a few feet in front of Lu Chen. Hua Yan's sturdiness were extremely outstanding even among the barbarian race's warriors. Originally, his stature was much larger than Lu Chen's. At this moment, Lu Chen was sitting on the ground, while he was standing. The difference between the two of them seemed to be even greater. It was as if an angry giant beast was staring at a small beast in front of it. Yi knelt to the side and looked at this somewhat tense and stiff scene. For some reason, his heart suddenly jumped to his throat. He was so nervous that he did not dare to breathe. However, Lu Chen's expression seemed to be very calm. He only lightly raised his head and looked at Hua Yan. He then pointed at the seat in front of him and said, "Sit." Hua Yan did not comply and sat down. He coldly looked at Lu Chen and said in a low voice, "Why did you do this?" Lu Chen didn't answer him immediately. Instead, he silently sat where he was. After a while, he didn't look at the giant like Hua Yan standing not far away from him. Instead, he faintly said, "Ever since you were young, didn't your father, the chief of the tribe, teach you to respect and observe some etiquette towards the tribe's priests?" As he said this, the atmosphere in the dark stone house suddenly became a bit more tense. A chill that seemed to be able to freeze one's bones began to spread in this place. Ye's whole body began to tremble slightly. She subconsciously curled up her body desperately. At the same time, in the depths of her heart, an idea suddenly flashed like a flash of lightning. These two people, the two most powerful people in the Black Fire tribe, seemed to be at odds with each other. "You go out first." Just as Ye's mind was in a state of panic and confusion, a voice suddenly sounded in front of her. It was Hua Yan who suddenly said this. His voice was low and calm. When he spoke, he did not even look at Ye's direction. It was obvious that he did not care about this Divine Wood tribe girl at all. Yi looked at Lu Chen with trepidation. When she saw him lightly wave his hand, she jumped up as if she had been pardoned and quickly walked out of the stone house. The moment she stepped out of the door, when light shone on her from outside, Yi somehow had the illusion that she had returned to the human world from hell. She let out a long sigh of relief. But very quickly, she found that there were many barbarian warriors standing around her. Each of them had a cold expression on their faces as they looked in her direction. On their hands, the sharp edges of the blades and axes were flashing with cold light. Ye's heart that had just warmed up suddenly turned cold again. Then it sank again. In the stone house, when there were no outsiders present, the atmosphere actually began to ease a little. Even the giant wolf Atsu that had been snuggling up to Lu Chen did not show any hostility or vigilance towards Hua Yan. Hua Yan silently sat down in front of Lu Chen. After which, he raised his head to look at the latter. Very quickly, he discovered that Lu Chen was still wearing the white bone mask. His brows involuntarily furrowed as his expression turned a little ugly. "Why are you wearing that again?" Lu Chen took off the white bone mask from his face and placed it at the side. He said, "When I inscribe the black fire runes on the bodies of those divine wood tribe people, I need them to not be too resistant, otherwise it will be very troublesome. I found that wearing this thing was quite useful, probably because this mask was passed down from their ancestors. When they saw me wearing it, they would feel relaxed, and they wouldn't be too hostile towards me, which made it easier for them to cast their spells." Hua Yan snorted and said, "Why do you want to use this kind of spell on them? You should know that this is a power that belongs to our Black Fire tribe." By the end of his sentence, Hua Yan had already raised his voice, showing the anger in his heart. Lu Chen did not look too surprised, nor did he speak up to defend himself. He only looked at him indifferently and said, "I told you before, the Black Fire tribe's warriors are too few, not enough to support our ambition of reviving the Black Fire tribe as soon as possible. Therefore, I can only find another way. The 20 people outside are also strong barbarian warriors. After receiving the Black Fire runes, they will also become valiant warriors. In this way, the strength of the Black Fire tribe will increase by another level." Hua Yan said angrily, "Nonsense! You're being reckless. In the future, every time you destroy a tribe, are you going to steal their warriors to do this?" "Yes," Lu Chen said calmly. "Didn't I already tell you about this idea? This is the most effective way to increase the strength of the Black Fire tribe in a short period of time." Hua Yan took a deep breath and shook his head, saying, "But I also told you that this method is not appropriate. You should know that if there are too many of these foreign tribes with the power of demonization, even more than the warriors of our Black Fire tribe, when the time comes, what should we do?" Chapter 327. Backlash. Lu Chen raised his eyes slightly and looked at the solemn Hua Yan. He asked in a slightly astonished tone. Hua Yan frowned and said, "What am I wrong?" Lu Chen pondered for a moment and said, "You're thinking too much. Firstly, the demonization of warriors is a kind of witchcraft. If I don't use it, they won't be able to obtain that kind of power." Hua Yan's expression did not relax. He stared at Lu Chen and said, "But if you continue to do this, there will be more and more warriors of the foreign races. Is there no risk? Once they reach a certain time, their numbers are too many, or they suddenly turn on us after demonizing on the battlefield. What will we do at that time?" Lu Chen said indifferently, "This is the second thing I wanted to tell you earlier. That black flame rune just happens to be able to control these divine wood race members. Once someone has any disloyal thoughts, just by relying on this thing, I have a way to instantly kill them." Hua Yan was startled. His face revealed an astonished expression. He said, "What? The black flame seal pattern has this kind of effect?" Lu Chen looked at him with a smile that was not a smile. He said, "What do you think? If it wasn't like that, why would I spend so much effort to slowly cast the curse one by one? Right, I forgot to tell you. The true name of the black flame seal pattern isn't the black flame seal pattern. It is a variant of witchcraft. Its original name is the Black Flame Curse." He smiled. His smile looked calm and serene, but there seemed to be an indescribable throbbing in his eyes at that moment. "That isn't a seal pattern. It's a kind of curse." The atmosphere in the stone house suddenly became a bit colder. No one spoke for a while. Then, after a while, Hua Yan suddenly stood up. Standing before Lu Chen, his tall stature looked extremely out of place. Furthermore, there was a faint biting cold murderous aura emanating from his body. Lu Chen seemed to have sensed something, and he slowly stood up and said, "What's wrong?" Hua Yan looked deeply at him, his gaze exceptionally sharp, like two daggers staring at Lu Chen. Then he slowly said, "Did you cast this curse on me and my black fire warriors?" Lu Chen didn't seem to be frightened by the barbarian's murderous aura. He even smiled faintly and said calmly, "I only know of one type of black flame curse. Of course it's the same type." Clang! A crisp sound rang out. It was Hua Yan's sudden growl. He reached out his hand and pulled out the dagger that was hanging on his waist. The bright light of the dagger was pointed at Lu Chen. On the other side, the giant wolf Atsu, who was originally a little lazy, suddenly jumped up. With a roar, it bared its sharp fangs at Hua Yan and pretended to pounce on him. In the dark stone house, the atmosphere suddenly became tense. The two sides seemed to be confronting each other, and the situation seemed to be on the verge of exploding. Hua Yan didn't pay attention to the growling Atsu beside Lu Chen. Instead, he stared at Lu Chen and gripped the dagger in his hand tightly. He said word by word, "Why?" Lu Chen shook his head and said, "No reason. I've already told you, the black flame curse is just like this. I can use the fire god staff to cast a variant spell to demonize you and increase your strength for a short period of time. But in the end, this kind of curse is still a curse. It naturally has the power to kill." He looked up at Hua Yan and said, "It seems like you don't like it?" Hua Yan's breathing was slightly hurried, his fangs crossed. He growled and said, "Who would like to have this kind of thing on their body? If that's the case, the lives of me and the other warriors will be in your hands. I can help you get rid of it now." Lu Chen suddenly interrupted him and said calmly. Hua Yan was stunned for a moment, as if he couldn't react in time. He looked at Lu Chen in shock. Lu Chen said, "You and the other black fire warriors, if you need it, I can help you get rid of this black flame curse. But correspondingly, you will lose the power of demonization on the battlefield." Hua Yan's expression changed intensely, but he still didn't say anything. Lu Chen looked at this barbarian man. A strange light flashed in the depths of his eyes. He said, "I think you're just afraid that I can control everyone's life and death. My power is too great, and I can even control the tribe? In fact, I still stand by my words. Your barbarian tribe is not worthy of my attention. I don't care about the things that you value so much. If you're afraid, give me the way to return to the north. I will get rid of all your curses now, then give up everything here and leave by myself. From then on, I will have nothing to do with your black fire tribe." Hua Yan looked at Lu Chen. Lu Chen didn't look away either, calmly looking at him. After a while, Hua Yan's expression changed. Suddenly, he turned his head away. The anger on his face quickly dissipated, and he slowly put away the blade in his hand. After a while, he said in a low voice, "Let me think about it first." Lu Chen smiled mockingly. Then his expression returned to normal and he nodded. Hua Yan turned and walked out. Just as he was about to reach the door, he suddenly squatted down and turned back to Lu Chen. "Don't tell anyone about this secret." Lu Chen nodded and said, "I know." Hua Yan looked at him deeply, then turned and walked out. The day's tense atmosphere gradually calmed down as Hua Yan silently walked out of the black-robed priest's stone house and took away all the Black Fire tribe warriors. As for Lu Chen, he didn't seem to be affected by this matter. After Hua Yan left, he continued to summon people into the stone house and cast the mysterious black fire seal on them. No one knew what happened between Hua Yan and the black-robed priest in the dark stone house, or what they talked about. Iron Bear, Black Bull, and the other Black Fire tribe warriors were very curious about this. They secretly asked Hua Yan a few times, but Hua Yan kept a straight face and didn't say anything. With the help of the Black Fire tribe's powerful divine weapon, the Fire God Staff, the black-robed priest, Lu Chen, spent a day's work and finally cast the Black Fire seal on all 20 people. After this, the abnormally tired Lu Chen drove them away. He only said that he would send you to summon them again in 2 days, and that they would know what he was going to do next. This answer obviously didn't satisfy the 20 divine wood warriors, but facing the black-robed priest, no matter how fierce they were, they didn't dare to be impudent. In the end, they could only leave dispiritedly. However, many people secretly warned Yi to act according to the situation and try to find out what this terrifying black-robed priest was thinking. Yes, for this goal they must do everything they can. Although they didn't say it explicitly, the meaning was very clear. Leaf also understood, but she did not seem to have any more emotional fluctuations. At most, she just nodded silently. Finally, after sending everyone off, she slowly walked back to the dark stone house. Ever since Lu Chen brought Atsu to live here, the stone house had never been lit with any torches or candles. It seemed that this mysterious black-robed priest was very disgusted with things like flames. When this thought flashed through Ye's mind, she couldn't help but be a little surprised. She thought to herself, "Your tribe is called Black Fire, and you worship a fire god. Why would the tribe priest hate flames and light?" But for some reason, when she left the familiar crowd outside and returned to this dark place, when the darkness and shadows quietly blocked the light behind her and the eyes of those people, Yi suddenly felt a sense of relief. She actually seemed to be relieved from the bottom of her heart. She was shocked by this feeling, and then she quickly felt a sense of guilt. She secretly clenched her teeth and scolded herself. "What's wrong with you?" A voice suddenly came from the front. It was the black-robed priest's deep voice in the dark corner. He still sounded a little tired, but he seemed to have noticed something. His eyes penetrated the darkness and fell on Yi. There seemed to be some light in his eyes. Yi was startled and quickly bowed her head. "I'm fine." "That's good," Lu Chen said lightly and then closed his eyes. It seemed that he didn't want to pursue the matter, or perhaps he had no interest in the feelings of these barbarians. Yi, who was a little nervous, was startled for a moment. After a while, she finally understood that her new master seemed to be too lazy to talk to her. She was a little embarrassed and a little cramped. After turning her head to look around, she wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. It seemed that she wanted to stand up and lean against the corner. Lu Chen suddenly said, "You sleep here." Yi glanced at him and found that the place Lu Chen pointed to was the farthest wall from her. She was relieved, but soon she remembered the important task entrusted to her by the villagers before she came here. Those eager eyes, so many people's hope of life and death, all seemed to depend on her alone. Even if it might make her sink into the terrible hell to spy on the most terrible person in the world. Yi felt a little cold, but she still gritted her teeth and quietly cried for herself in the deepest part of her heart. Then she squeezed out a smile and slowly approached the black-robed priest. "Your Excellency, do you need me to serve you?" Lu Chen, who had closed his eyes to rest, frowned slightly and opened his eyes again. He found that Yi, who was approaching him, was trembling slightly, but it seemed that she had summoned up her courage and slowly reached out to untie her clothes. Lu Chen was silent. After a moment he said, "Don't smile. I think your smile is ugly." Chapter 328. Ye's hand suddenly froze in front of her chest, and then she looked at the black-robed priest with shame and anger. However, Lu Chen obviously didn't mean to pay attention to her. He just waved his hand and said, "Go sleep over there, don't disturb me." "Yes," Yi answered in a low voice. She didn't know why, but she suddenly felt relieved, and the anger she had before disappeared. Even when she looked at Lu Chen, she felt that this black-robed priest didn't seem to be as terrible and disgusting as she had imagined. However, memories quickly surfaced in her mind. That day, in the old tribal camp, many of the clansmen she had known since she was young had died under the hands of this black-robed priest, died in that terrifying black fire. That painful howl was still reminding her, making Yi suddenly feel very ashamed of her weakness just now. She lowered her head and walked back to the corner of the wall that belonged to her, and unexpectedly found that there were 2 or 3 animal skin mattresses there. She was startled for a moment, and looked back, only to see that Lu Chen's figure had merged with the darkness, as if he had become a part of the shadow, making it hard to see him clearly. She stared at that side for a moment, and then gritted her teeth, gently moved the animal skin mattresses to the side, and then lay down against the wall. The ground and the wall were very cold, but the animal skin mattresses not far away looked unusually warm. Ye's body trembled slightly, but in the end, she still closed her eyes. She had seen and heard too many things that day, and also suffered a lot of stimulation and shock. At first, she felt very awake and couldn't fall asleep, but after lying down for a while, her eyelids started to droop, and she unknowingly fell asleep. Many people saw the scene of Hua Yan rushing in angrily that day. Some were surprised, and some were secretly delighted. But in the end, Hua Yan went into the stone house alone and stayed for a long time. When he came out again, he didn't say a word, and left with his men. This also made many people who were originally nervous, or wanted to see a good show, shocked. In the following days, with the changes in the tribe's camp and various situations, the deeds of Lu Chen, the black-robed priest, began to be known by everyone, immediately shocking the entire Black Fire tribe. 3 days after Hua Yan left Lu Chen's place, the chief of the Black Fire tribe, Hua Hu, found him. The father and son had a serious conversation. At the same time, there were also 6 elders who were highly respected in the tribe. They were elders that Hua Yan had to greet whenever he met them. In this conversation, Flaming Tiger straightforwardly expressed his distrust of Lu Chen to his son. At the same time, he sternly warned him that there had never been an outsider who had become a priest of the Black Fire tribe, and Lu Chen's behavior after becoming a priest was incompatible with the behavior of all the great priests in the history of the tribe. This person is not of our race, so he definitely has ulterior motives. He was definitely not an emissary of the fire god. He was a minion of the devil. If we don't get rid of this black-robed priest, then our Black Fire tribe will perish in the hands of this terrifying human. The other 6 elders in the meeting all agreed, either solemnly or tactfully persuading Hua Yan, telling him not to be muddle-headed and to wake up as soon as possible. Everyone said that our Black Fire tribe has lived in this wasteland for thousands of years, following the rules of our ancestors. We have always lived well, and there is no need for any changes. That black-robed priest has gone against the rules, committed outrages, and even used the witchcraft of the Black Fire tribe on those captives. Such vile behavior will soon provoke the wrath of the fire god, and he may even send down divine punishment. When that time comes, won't we both be sinners of the tribe? When he reached the end of his speech, Hua Hu stood in front of his son. His aged face seemed to be somewhat distorted from his emotions. He grabbed Hua Yan's arm and said in a hoarse voice, "I'm old, son. The position of tribe leader will be yours sooner or later. As long as you kill that human, I will immediately abdicate and hand over the position of tribe leader to you." From the beginning to the end, Hua Yan, who had been unusually silent, finally stood up. But strangely, his face did not reveal the excited and sudden awakening expression that Hua Hu and the other elders wanted to see. This tall and sturdy barbarian was in the prime of his life. He was a barbarian in his prime. He was majestic and mighty, and had the ambition and meticulousness that ordinary men did not have. He could see further than them, and he stood taller than them. Occasionally, when he turned his head back, Hua Yan would realize that he no longer had any companions by his side. There was a bit of pain and disappointment in the depths of his eyes, but his expression was still calm. He stood up in front of the most senior elders of the tribe, and said in front of his father, Fire Tiger, "You don't have to worry about these things in the future." After saying that, he ignored the astonished and angry gazes around him, turned around and walked out, leaving behind a room of angry elders and a suffocating atmosphere. Lu Chen only learned of this matter from Hua Yan the next day at noon. When Hua Yan came to find him, Lu Chen had just finished training the 20 strong Divine Wood warriors and let them go back first. The so-called training, of course, did not mean that Lu Chen would teach these barbarian warriors how to kill people or how to use weapons. Instead, it was to let these people familiarize themselves with the demonized state that he would enter after casting the spell, and how to better kill people. Apart from this, Lu Chen also told all the Divine Wood warriors that when casting the demonized sorcery, he would also plant the world's most vicious curse on everyone's body. If anyone dared to betray him, they would be burned alive in the terrifying black flames. After death, even their souls would not be able to escape, let alone return to the embrace of their ancestors and gods. But as long as all of you listen to my orders and serve me loyally, as long as you achieve great merit, you will be able to remove this curse. At the same time, from this day onwards, all the Divine Wood warriors would be known as the Black Fire Guards, and would only listen to the orders of the black-robed priest. These words of course quickly spread throughout the entire Black Fire tribe, and at the same time caused a huge uproar. It also became the evidence that the elders of the Black Fire tribe increasingly hated Lu Chen. When the sun set that evening, when Hua Yan sat with him in the stone house, this barbarian already looked somewhat disappointed. Lu Chen looked at him and said, "What's wrong, are you unable to bear it?" Hua Yan waved his hand and closed his eyes as he leaned against the wall. After a while he said, "I didn't expect Father and the other elders to be so short-sighted. They can't see at all why I want to push this matter forward." Lu Chen sighed, walked to his side and sat down saying, "You're wrong." Hua Yan opened his eyes and looked at him saying, "What do you mean?" Lu Chen said, "You can see so much foresight and do so many daring things, That's because you are a unique and different barbarian. Among so many tribes in the wilderness, how many barbarians like you are there? You can't even find one in an ordinary tribe. Perhaps it's normal that they don't understand you? Hua Yan smiled bitterly and said softly, I just want to restore the glory of my ancestral tribe. I don't deserve such praise. He paused and frowned, saying, Oh right, can you keep a low profile when dealing with those 20 black fire guards? You know what the situation is now. Demonizing every day is like stabbing their hearts with a knife. Lu Chen shrugged, saying, I can't help it, time is too tight. Hua Yan was startled, saying, What do you mean? Lu Chen said indifferently, In 3 days, Thunder Lizard, Ghost Fox and Mountain Spirit, you can choose one of these 3 tribes. Hua Yan was shocked and stood up abruptly, saying, What, how long has it been you're going to fight? Lu Chen said calmly and firmly, The wilderness is so big, there are so many tribes, we don't have time to waste. Even you didn't expect us to start a war so soon, then, those 3 tribes definitely didn't expect it either. Hua Yan didn't know what to say for a moment. After a while he said, Sometimes I feel that in the world, we barbarians are the most warlike, but compared to you, we are worlds apart. Lu Chen sneered. He turned around and walked into the depths of the darkness. At the same time he said, Stop pretending. Anyway, it's just blood and lives. In the wilderness, the victor is everything. You're the one who said that to me. Hua Yan was silent for a long time, then turned around and walked out of the stone house. As he walked in the open space of the tribe's camp, he occasionally raised his head to look at the dark sky, and suddenly saw a meteor flying across the night sky. That was a bold and unrestrained meteor, emitting a dazzling brilliance, instantly lighting up the entire starry sky, dazzling people's eyes. It flew passionately and fiercely, as if it was rushing forward recklessly, piercing through the darkness, until it finally disappeared into the depths of the distant darkness. Hua Yan stared blankly at the meteor's last light disappearing into the night sky, suddenly feeling a chill. When he lowered his head, he found that there was a slight gust of wind in the surroundings. In the darkness of the wilderness, the wind was blowing. Chapter 329. This can't go on any longer. An angry roar came from the house. Although it was suppressed, making the voice sound low, some echoes still floated out from the gap of the closed door. One could feel how angry the person in the house was at this moment. Standing outside the closed door were 4 or 5 barbarian males of the Black Fire tribe. They stood a distance away from each other and surrounded the house behind them. At the same time, they were vigilantly watching their surroundings. But in the dead of the night, no one would notice anything strange. Of course, the barbarian at the entrance had heard the angry roar just now. He turned his head to look, and his eyes were filled with worry. But soon, he also turned his head back, and cautiously kept his guard up, not allowing any outsiders to come close. At the same time, in the room behind the door, a lit lamp illuminated the people inside. In the middle of the room sat the old chief of the Black Fire tribe, Fire Tiger, with his grandson, Fire Eagle, by his side. Aside from the 2 of them, there were 6 other people in the house. They were the 6 tribal elders who had persuaded Hua Yan with Flaming Tiger. The one who had roared like a wild beast was one of the 6 elders. His name was Qi Shi. He didn't look young and was about the same age as Flaming Tiger. He had a head full of white hair and one of his 2 fangs was missing. However, this old man was a fierce general of the Black Fire tribe when he was young. He had been fighting for his entire life. Although he was old, his fierce and valiant aura was still there. At the same time, his irascible temper hadn't changed. At this moment, Qi Shi's furious roar reverberated within the room. He paced up and down within the room before abruptly turning around and saying loudly to Flaming Tiger, "Patriarch, did you hear what I said or not?" Flaming Tiger frowned and slightly nodded, indicating that he understood. But his eyebrows were still tightly knitted, as if he had a lot on his mind. Seeing Patriarch Hua Hu's appearance, the other elders had different expressions. After a while, another elder at the side with a slightly gentler expression pulled Qi Shi and said in a low voice, "All right, Patriarch knows what he's doing. Don't shout randomly. If your voice is too loud and is heard by others, they might run to tell Hua Yan or that black-robed priest, and there might be big trouble." Qi Shi snorted heavily, his face filled with anger and reluctance. However, it seemed that he was still somewhat fearful of the two people mentioned. Finally, he walked to the side and sat down. Only then did this elder, who had persuaded the irascible old barbarian, turn around and look at Hua Hu. He asked in a low voice, "Patriarch, what are your plans now?" The wrinkles on Fire Tiger's aged face were deep, as if the harsh wasteland had already engraved the sands of time on his body. On this piece of land, the majority of people couldn't live to Hua Hu's age, so his knowledge and reputation had always been second to none in the Black Fire tribe. Everyone had always trusted him for many years. That was until his son, Hua Yan, grew up and displayed his extraordinary talent and strength in front of the tribe's people. To this day, every barbarian of the Black Fire tribe believed that Hua Yan would be the next patriarch. His strength, wisdom, and courage were unparalleled in the Black Fire tribe. All of this gradually became a public opinion. Sometimes, it would make people feel as if everyone was waiting for the day of old Hua Hu's death. Fire Tiger didn't like this feeling. Since a long time ago, when his son, Hua Yan, rose to power, he disliked it. But even if he was the patriarch, he couldn't do anything about it. Therefore, he could only remain silent most of the time. Then, with a complicated gaze, he would secretly peep at his son who was growing stronger and stronger day by day. "Patriarch!" A somewhat surprised voice sounded in Hua Hu's ear, startling him. He woke up from his daze, only to discover that he had unknowingly been in a daze for a while. Is this the feeling of growing old? Hua Hu felt a bit sad for a moment, but he didn't show it on his face. He only muttered to himself for a moment, pretending to be in deep thought. Then he asked, "White Eagle, what do you think?" This elder named White Eagle was also one of the most prestigious elders in the Black Fire tribe. He had assisted Hua Hu for many years and could be said to be deeply trusted by the old patriarch. But it was also because of this that White Eagle understood Hua Hu far better than anyone else. Hua Hu's expression just now had fooled the others, but not White Eagle's eyes. However, White Eagle didn't make any strange expression at this moment. Instead, a trace of worry flashed in the depths of his eyes, and he said to Hua Hu in a low voice, "Patriarch, what Brother Chi Rhino said just now actually makes sense. If we let Hua Yan and that human called Lu Yuan continue to mess around like this, I'm afraid that something big will really happen." Hua Hu didn't immediately speak, but Fire Eagle, who was beside him, asked, "Grandpa White Eagle, what bad things will happen?" White Eagle glanced at Hua Hu, and after a moment of hesitation he said, "First of all, they are too warlike. It has only been a few days since they attacked the Divinewood tribe, but they are already preparing to attack another tribe. Although the warriors of our Black Fire tribe are brave and valiant, there aren't too many of them. As long as it's a war, there will definitely be casualties, and as time goes on, we will definitely not be able to withstand it." The other elders and Fire Eagle nodded, and then White Eagle said, "Also, now that Lu Chen has also taken the captured Divinewood warriors as people of the Black Fire tribe. He has also placed black fire runes on their bodies, and named them Black Fire Guards, and they will only listen to him. What does this mean? If he has any ulterior motives in the future, how will our Black Fire tribe deal with him? And the worst thing is, at this moment, Chi Rhino, who had just sat down, suddenly stood up again, walked in front of everyone, and said with an agitated expression, "Now we can all see that Lu Chen and Hua Yan plan to continue fighting, and then intend to exterminate the tribe, then capture people, and then use Black Fire runes to increase their fighting strength. But everyone, don't forget, according to their methods, it won't be long before our Black Fire tribe's warriors die, but the other tribes will capture more and more Black Fire Guards and obey the priest. At that time, will the Black Fire tribe still be the Black Fire tribe? In the tribe at that time, who would be the one who kept their word? Will it be us Black Fire barbarians, or that black-robed priest called Lu Chen?" The room was silent, and no one opened their mouth to answer Chi Rhino's straightforward question. Only Fire Eagle, who was still young, suddenly flew into a rage. He turned over and jumped up, saying angrily, "We can't let this happen. Damn it, we should have killed that monster with one strike." Killed that black-robed priest with one strike? The few elders in the room, except for the simple-minded Chi Rhino, who was extremely angry and impulsive, looked at each other. After looking at each other a few times, they all frowned and did not speak. Although most of the barbarians were impulsive, violent, and ferocious, as long as they were old and still alive, most of them would have seen a lot of things, experienced a lot of hardships, and understood some of the principles of life. On the contrary, barbarians like Chi Rhino, who had always been impulsive and angry until old, were actually rare in their age group. White Eagle was the same. Compared to when he was young, the current him was especially calm. He didn't answer Fire Eagle's words, but looked at the old Chief Fire Tiger and called out softly, "Chief!" Fire Tiger slowly raised his head and glanced at White Eagle. His voice sounded a little low. "What do you want me to do?" White Eagle wanted to say something but stopped. Chi Rhino, who was next to him, became anxious. He simply took a few steps forward and said, "Chief, the current situation of the tribe is critical. We need you to come out and rectify it." Fire Tiger sighed, and there seemed to be some helplessness on his face. He said, "Rectify? How? It's not like you don't know the situation of the tribe. Today, almost all the warriors of the younger generation were brought up by Hua Yan. They can be said to be dead set on him. Even I, the chief, may not be as useful as Hua Yan." White Eagle walked to Fire Tiger's side and sat down. He said softly, "Chief, no matter what, the position of chief is still yours. As long as you speak, the young people of the tribe will have to listen. Even if Hua Yan's reputation is soaring, as long as he doesn't say anything, as long as you come out, you can still control the situation." Fire Tiger's complexion slightly changed. He looked at White Eagle and said, "What do you mean?" White Eagle was silent, but at the same time, the other elders, including Chi Shi, stood up at the same time and walked behind White Eagle. Fire Tiger's complexion greatly changed. He suddenly stood up and stared at these people. He didn't know why, but his old face twisted. Even his voice became a little hoarse. He hissed, "Are you crazy? He is my son." Chapter 330. Behind Hua Hu, the young firehawk suddenly stood up, but he seemed a little confused. He didn't seem to understand why his grandfather had suddenly become so agitated, and why the surrounding atmosphere had suddenly become so tense. Firehawk instinctively rushed to Hua Hu's side and grabbed the knife at his waist with one hand. He then looked warily at the tribal elders of his grandfather's generation, and then at his grandfather with some doubts. Opposite him, White Eagle, who was standing in front of the crowd, sighed. He didn't seem to care about Firehawk's offending appearance. He even reached out and patted Firehawk's shoulder, indicating that he had no malice. Then he looked at Hua Hu with a complicated expression, saying, "Patriarch, I've been with you for most of my life. At this age, I won't have any other thoughts." Hua Hu's expression seemed to have calmed down a little. He glanced at White Eagle, then reached out and pulled back his grandson, who was in front of him, and whispered, "It's all right." Firehawk let out an "oh." Then Hua Hu looked at the others. After a long silence he suddenly said, "Hua Yan said that Lu Chen is the emissary of the fire god, and that he carries the will of the fire god. What do you think?" Before White Eagle could speak, Scarlet Rhinoceros had already shouted, "This is complete nonsense. Since ancient times, not to mention our Black Fire tribe, even among the thousands of tribes in the southern wilderness, which one of them has ever heard of a human being a priest?" Hua Hu was speechless. White Eagle and the other elders didn't look good, but no one said anything. Scarlet Rhino's words were indeed very reasonable, and the facts of the past were indeed so. But at this moment, the people present, intentionally or unintentionally, had all avoided another equally irrefutable fact, and that was that Lu Chen possessed the power of black fire that couldn't be clearer. In any case, he wasn't a barbarian, nor a member of the Black Fire tribe. He didn't have the bloodline of the Black Fire, so there must be something wrong with him. Everything was fake. Even if he had the Black Fire, it must be a trick. Hua Hu's face was wooden. After a moment he whispered, "Then Hua Yan," White Eagle immediately said, "that human race priest's methods are crafty. Perhaps he secretly used some method to confuse nephew Hua Yan's mind." Before Fire Tiger could say anything, Firehawk, who was standing behind him, suddenly became excited. He nodded repeatedly and said, "That's right, that's right. I also feel that father has been acting a little strange recently. He's been hanging out with that human all day long." "Shut up!" Hua Hu suddenly shouted angrily, interrupting his grandson's words. However, White Eagle, Scarlet Rhino, and the others had already nodded and followed Firehawk's words. At the same time, they advised Fire Tiger, "Patriarch, even little Firehawk thinks so. This is an extremely critical moment. For the future of our Black Fire tribe, you must make a prompt decision. Fire Tiger's complexion was ashen. It seemed as if he had suddenly aged a lot at this moment. He looked at the old people in front of him, then turned his head to look at his grandson, Fire Eagle, who still had a face full of anger. His mouth opened a few times, but no words came out. In the end, he slowly sat back down. I'm already old. I don't know how many more years I can live. Fire Tiger's voice sounded particularly hoarse and low, as if he was making a final struggle. He said in a low voice, "Originally, I could not be more at ease with Huayan inheriting the position. But if something happens to me in the future, this is a major matter for the tribe." Everyone looked at each other, not daring to say anything for a moment. Only White Eagle's expression remained the same. He walked to Fire Tiger's side and said, "Patriarch, don't worry. If nephew Huayan is fine, we naturally won't do anything to him. But if he's been bewitched too deeply by that human shaman and is unable to free himself, for the future of our tribe, there's nothing we can do." Hearing this, Firehawk, who was standing to the side, suddenly trembled. It was as if he had only just understood something. Immediately, his entire face turned pale, and he looked completely devoid of blood. Even his body began to tremble slightly. White Eagle glanced at this young boy and saw the shock, panic, and fear on his face. He frowned slightly, and a trace of disdain flashed in the depths of his eyes. Then he looked at Fire Tiger and said in a low voice, "Moreover, don't you still have Firehawk? He's your grandson, and your blood runs through his veins. As long as you focus on nurturing him, us old fellows will definitely support him with all our strength. In a few years, I think Firehawk will definitely become a qualified patriarch." When he said the last two words, White Eagle turned to Firehawk and deliberately emphasized his words. Firehawk was dumbfounded, but gradually, he seemed to understand something. The emotions in his eyes suddenly became blazing, and even the fear and panic he had just felt were replaced by this new surge of excitement. He was so excited that even his breathing became heavy. But after a moment, he suddenly sensed something. He turned his head and saw that his grandfather, Fire Tiger, was staring at him. Firehawk's heart turned cold, and he subconsciously lowered his head. Fire Tiger stared at his grandson for a long time, and finally let out a long sigh and slowly shook his head. Before Yi became the mysterious and terrifying black-robed priest's maid, she had always been terrified when she arrived in front of the dark stone house. The advice of her clansmen had given her a tragic feeling, and she felt that she would soon die in that stone house. Perhaps she would even be tortured, but if it was for the sake of so many clansmen, perhaps everything would be worth it. But to her surprise, life in this stone house was different from what she had expected from the beginning. The black-robed priest was silent most of the time, but he did not offend her in any way. Well, perhaps he was not interested in her, and even bluntly said that she had an ugly smile. Well, it's better to be talked to like this than to be thrown on the bed and ravaged, Yezi thought with a bit of joy. In these days, the priest named Lu Chen ordered her to do things very naturally. All kinds of chores, including going out to call for her clansmen, were handed over to her. This also brought about another effect, and that was, the captured Divinewood clansmen now generally believed that the black-robed priest had slept with Yi, and that was why they believed her. In the beginning, Yi actually wanted to explain, but she quickly gave up on this idea because she found that it seemed that this was the only way for her clansmen to be happy and live more energetically. Although many people began to look at her with strange emotions, which seemed to be hidden very deeply like some sharp things. Stabbing people. It was very strange, and even Yi herself could not figure out why. She felt that she had clearly come to Lu Chen's side for the sake of her clansmen. Although Lu Chen really did not do anything to her, in everyone's impression, shouldn't she have done something good for her clansmen? But why was there disdain and contempt in their eyes? Even if everyone was smiling and comforting her in front of her, the stinging in their eyes had never disappeared. Yi! A sudden call awakened Yi from her daze. Yi quivered and jumped up. She hurriedly ran over to the black-robed priest who was sitting in the dock and said, "Sir, do you have any orders?" Lu Chen looked at her indifferently and said, "Go to the camp and ask the Firehawk chief to come here." Yi replied with an, "Oh," and agreed. Nowadays, Lu Chen had gotten used to ordering her to do these kinds of errands. She, who walked around the camp all day, seemed to have gained the approval of most of the Black Fire clansmen. She turned and walked out. But when she passed by the door, The giant wolf that was lying there like a guard dog suddenly roared at her and bared its teeth fiercely. Yi was so scared that she screamed and took 2 steps back. Seeing that it had scared Leaves, the black wolf too barked twice proudly and lay back down, as if nothing had happened. Yezi cursed the abominable big black wolf countless times in her heart, but on the surface, she could only avoid it awkwardly and even fearfully. In this dim stone house, it seemed that the black-robed priest was actually a decent person, but the beast was particularly abominable, scaring people all day long. A few nights ago, it even lay beside her in the middle of the night and suddenly roared, almost scaring Yezi out of her wits. She did not sleep well for several days. But after that incident, it seemed that the black-robed priest could not stand it anymore. He grabbed the giant wolf named Atsu and scolded it. He seemed to have kicked the giant wolf a few times. Only then did Atsu become more well-behaved, and Yi was gradually able to sleep peacefully. Unexpectedly, this stupid dog seemed to have a problem again today. While thinking, Yi had already walked out of the house and walked forward quickly. Now she was very familiar with the situation in the Black Fire camp. The other Divine Wood tribesmen were still somewhat restricted and could not walk freely in the Black Fire camp. She was the only exception. It was not the first time that she had gone to pass a message to Huayan on behalf of Lu Chen, so she knew where Huayan lived. She was very familiar with the way, but when she was about halfway there, Yi suddenly froze and stopped. A man stopped her on the road. After her identity as the black-robed priest's maid was made public, no one deliberately made things difficult for her or stopped her from walking in the camp. Today was the first time. Yi was a little surprised and a little nervous because she recognized this person. Although this person was not very old, he was very famous in the Black Fire tribe and many people would give in to him. He was Huaying, the grandson of the chief Huahu and the son of the chief Huayan. He stopped Leaf and looked at Leaf's face with a strange look. Chapter 331. The Fire Falcon was not very old. At most, he could be considered a half-grown boy, so Yezi did not feel anything strange from his body or the way he looked at her. If it were any other adult tribal male, Yezi would usually feel that they were too brave and strong. Based on her past experience, Yezi would usually feel that other people would look at her with a kind of tyrannical and possessive emotion. Whether it was the current victors of the Black Fire tribe or her former homeland, the Divine Wood tribe, it was more or less the same. After all, in the wilderness, men were superior to women for many years. In contrast, it seemed that although the black-robed priest called Lu Chen was a little cold to her, he seemed to be far easier to get along with than the others after living in the same room for a period of time. At least during these days, apart from the occasional harassment from the fat, big, stupid dog, Yezi suddenly found that the fear she should have had seemed to have faded a lot. Instead, her mood gradually became more relaxed. Eat well and sleep well? This feeling shocked Yezi. For a moment, she was in a trance, and an unusually complicated feeling flashed through her heart. Opposite her, the Fire Falcon was also startled. He originally thought that if he suddenly jumped out to stop this maidservant called Yezi, she would probably be surprised or scream. Who knew that there would be no surprise, and instead, he found that she was just standing there in a daze. This woman can't be stupid, right? The Fire Falcon thought to himself. After thinking about it, it was indeed very likely. If there were no flaws, the Divine Wood tribe probably would not have pushed her out. Hey! After thinking about this, the Fire Falcon suddenly felt a little depressed. He could not be bothered to talk nonsense with Yezi anymore, and directly asked, "Where are you going?" After being shouted at by him, Yezi immediately woke up with a start. At the same time, a look of surprise appeared on her face. No matter what, the Fire Falcon's identity was not ordinary, and it was very likely that he would be the future chief of the Black Fire tribe. He could not allow a captive like her to be disrespectful. Therefore, Yezi quickly lowered her head and said carefully, "I'm going to find the chief of the Firehawk tribe." "Find my father?" The Firehawk frowned, then seemed to have thought of something, and his expression became somewhat ugly. He coldly snorted and said, "Did Lu Chen order you to find my father? What does he want?" Yi was startled for a moment and faintly felt that something was wrong. He secretly glanced at the Firehawk and said, "Young master, Lord Priest ordered me to invite the Firehawk leader to the stone house to discuss some matters. He didn't tell me anything else." Fire Eagle thought for a moment and probably accepted Ye's explanation. After all, she was just an ordinary maid who had been captured. If there was really something important between her father, Huayan, and the black-robed priest, he would definitely not let her know. The firehawk immediately nodded and said, "That's perfect. I just came from my father's place, so I don't have to make another trip. Go back and tell Lu Chen that my father and my grandfather are discussing an important matter in his residence, and it just so happens that I need to invite the priest over and ask for his opinion. Go back and ask him to come to my father's residence." Yi was stunned for a moment and said, "You want me to go? Go and ask Lu Chen to come over for a discussion." The firehawk glared at her and said angrily, "What? Our Black Fire Tribe's chief-in-chief are both here. Can't we invite him?" Whether or not they could invite the black-robed priest was naturally up to the person called Lu Chen to decide. Yi was just a little maid who had no choice but to live under someone else's roof. Of course, she did not dare to argue with the firehawk. After being shouted at like that, she was immediately startled and hurriedly agreed before turning around and running away. The firehawk looked at the back of the little maid as she ran away with large strides, and the anger on his face slowly dissipated. He then slowly turned around and could vaguely see the stone house where Huayan lived. As he looked at that place, a trace of haze flashed across his face. Yezi ran all the way back to the black-robed priest's stone house. When she entered the door, Atu, the malicious stupid dog, seemed to want to make fun of her again. Fortunately, Yezi hurriedly shouted to the dark corner inside, Your Excellency, the chief is calling for you." In the depths of the dimly lit stone house, a black shadow shook for a moment. Then Lu Chen's voice came over. "Didn't you tell him that I asked you to invite him over?" Yi hurriedly told Lu Chen what the firehawk had said to her when she met him on the way here. After Lu Chen heard this, he seemed to be silent for a moment. Then, as if to confirm with her, he repeated saying, "Just now, what that firehawk said to you was that the chief and the chief of the Firerock clan are discussing something, and then asked me to go over?" "Yes." Yi nodded repeatedly. Lu Chen seemed to respond casually. Then, he quieted down and sat in the same place without any movement. Yi was a little stunned. At the same time, she thought to herself that this black-robed priest seemed to have an extraordinary position of power in the Black Fire Tribe. Even when the chief-in-chief jointly invited him to a gathering, he dared to be so neglectful. Just as her thoughts were running wild, she suddenly felt a gust of wind in front of her. It turned out that a shadow slowly walked out from the depths of the stone house and walked towards the door. Yi breathed a sigh of relief in her heart. It seemed that this person was not too out of line, she thought. But at this moment, the giant black wolf Atsu that had shrunk back to the ground suddenly raised its head and stood up from the ground. It seemed to have sensed something. It stared at the approaching Lu Chen and suddenly growled in a low voice. The growl contained an indescribable fierceness. Yi was startled and could not help but take a few steps to the side. You're crazy again?" Yi stared at the abominable big dog and shouted. She deliberately raised her voice so that the black-robed priest could hear her and scold the stupid dog like before. Because every time this happened, Atsu would behave for a while, and Yi could sleep peacefully for at least 2 days. Unexpectedly, after Lu Chen walked over, he did not have the slightest intention of scolding Atsu. Instead, he looked down at Atsu and reached out his hand to gently touch Atsu's head. Atsu bared its fangs and looked ferocious, as if it was about to eat someone. Yi clenched her fists nervously. She thought to herself, "If you have the guts, bite this priest to death and then eat him. I'll consider you a capable person." "You want to go with me?" It was Lu Chen who asked Atsu in a low voice. Atsu wagged its tail and stood beside his feet. Lu Chen smiled, nodded, and walked out of the door. Yi was at a loss for a moment, unsure if she should follow. But before Lu Chen walked out, he suddenly turned back and said to her, "Go call the Black Fire Guards and ask them to go to the Firerock leader's side." Yi was stunned for a moment, then nodded and said, "Okay, I'll ask the group outside to go." There were a total of 20 Black Fire Guards trained by Lu Chen. These days, they were divided into 4 shifts and took turns to guard outside the house. There were 3 shifts a day, and each shift was 4 hours long. At the moment, there were 5 people guarding outside the house, so Yi asked this question. Unexpectedly, after a moment of silence, Lu Chen shook his head and said, "No, call all of them." Ye's body trembled slightly, and a look of shock appeared on her face. Lu Chen looked at her calmly and did not speak. After a while, Yi seemed to wake up from a dream and hurriedly said, Yes, yes, I'll go now. As she spoke, she quickly ran out of the stone house. When the sunlight outside fell on her, she didn't know why, but she didn't feel any warmth. She only felt a faint chill enveloping her body, causing her to subconsciously shiver. Chapter 332. Lu Chen walked slowly through the Black Fire Tribe's camp. Along the way, he often saw people from the Black Fire Tribe coming and going. The Black Fire Barbarians also saw Lu Chen, but perhaps out of awe or disgust, no one dared to approach him, let alone take the initiative to greet Lu Chen. Lu Chen was already used to this kind of treatment. In fact, this made him feel more comfortable. If the surrounding barbarians really saw him as a real tribe priest and worshipped him infinitely, he would have a huge headache if they rushed over and kowtowed to him. Along the way, the Black Fire Tribe's camp looked very peaceful. Everywhere he looked, the Black Fire Tribe members were also very normal. But as he walked towards Huayan's residence, Lu Chen still quietly took out the Vulcan staff and held it in his hand. It was normal for a priest to have a staff in his hand. Perhaps it was because he walked slowly, or Yi ran quickly because she was anxious. But when Lu Chen was almost at the stone house where Huayan lived, 20 Black Fire Guards had already rushed over. And behind these barbarian warriors, there was a barbarian girl looking at them from afar. It was Yi. But looking at her, it seemed that she didn't want to come over. Lu Chen glanced at her, but didn't mind. He even smiled at her, then turned his head to look at the Black Fire Guards. Just as Lu Chen had said before, these 20 barbarian warriors were actually Divine Wood race members who had been captured and surrendered. They had been selected by Lu Chen, and after casting black flame runes on them, he had ordered people to prepare special clothes for them. Now, they could be considered as a small army that only obeyed his orders. Even Lu Chen directly told these black fire runes that could kill people. In short, they could either work for him or die. This sounded very evil, but Lu Chen did it without any hindrance. It was unknown if it was because he grew up in such a dark and sinister environment that his heart was as hard as iron, or if he saw that these were all barbarians and had no compassion for them. As for what he was thinking in his heart, only he himself knew. In front of this mysterious and terrifying black-robed priest, the 20 Black Fire Guards were all expressionless. After all, their lives were in someone else's hands, and no one would have a good expression. Lu Chen didn't care about this either. After all, he only wanted the power of these people to die for him. When he whispered some instructions to the Black Fire Guards, and then turned to walk towards the Fire Rock house, Lu Chen suddenly thought of the time when he was still in the Kunlun Mountains in the north. At that time, although the days in the Kunlun party were a little boring, looking at it now, how could it not be a little warm? Moreover, there was still that young girl who loved to smile most of the time. Even recalling her seemed to warm his heart. He shook his head and collected his thoughts. Then, he looked at the door of the stone house and saw the Firehawk standing there. Apart from him, there were 2 other tall Black Fire Tribe warriors standing behind him. Lu Chen quietly looked at Huayan. His gaze was calm, but it could not be said to be gentle. However, Hua Ying seemed to be a bold and courageous youth of the barbarian tribe. Not only was he not afraid of the black-robed priest like the other barbarians, he even sneered and stared at Lu Chen without any intention of retreating. Lu Chen walked over and said, "Why are you here?" The Firehawk snorted, but then he seemed to have thought of something and suppressed his temper. He said, "My grandfather and father are waiting for you inside. They have something to discuss with you." "Okay," Lu Chen replied, as if he did not suspect anything. He then walked towards the stone house. However, at this moment, Hua Ying suddenly stretched out his hand and stopped him. He said, "Wait a moment." Lu Chen's footsteps paused. He asked, "What is it?" Hua Ying expressionlessly said, "My grandfather just said that only the 3 of you can enter. At the same time, in order to be on guard, no one is allowed to bring weapons inside." "Weapons?" Lu Chen seemed to understand after thinking for a while. He raised the fire god staff in his hand slightly and said, "Are you talking about this fire god staff?" Hua Ying was just about to speak when he suddenly heard a ferocious roar from the side. It was the giant black wolf beside Lu Chen. It suddenly walked out from behind him and bared its teeth, staring fiercely at Hua Ying as if it was about to pounce on him. Hua Ying's heart turned cold. Previously, he had been pounced on by this giant wolf once. To be honest, that time, he was quite frightened. At this moment, he subconsciously took 2 steps back, but he immediately realized that he was a little embarrassed. He said angrily, "Lu Chen, aren't you going to take care of this demonic wolf?" Lu Chen waved his hand, and Atsu's ferocious aura retracted slightly. Hua Ying heaved a sigh of relief, but his face darkened as he said to Lu Chen, "Leave the fire god's staff here and go in yourself." Lu Chen glanced at him indifferently, but shook his head. Then, without saying a word, he prepared to walk into the house again. Hua Ying was immediately enraged. He had been the pride of the tribe since he was young, and everyone knew that he was the candidate for the future patriarch. For the sake of Hua Hu and Hua Yan, everyone would give in to him. Even adult warriors would be extremely polite when they spoke to him, and no one had ever looked down on him so openly. Therefore, Hua Ying exploded with the same impulse as before. Of course, it was also possible that he had other thoughts. He suddenly rushed in front of Lu Chen and blocked his path. He said angrily, "Leave the fire god's staff behind before you can go in." Lu Chen looked at him and said, "What if I don't want to stay?" Hua Ying sneered, "Then don't even think about going in." Lu Chen thought for a moment, then said with an, "Oh, all right, then I won't go in." With that, he turned around and left. Hua Ying's original sneer instantly froze on his face as if it had frozen. He opened his mouth in shock, but at this moment, he didn't know what to do. What are you doing?" he stammered as he shouted at Lu Chen's back. At the same time, his voice was filled with disbelief and indescribable anger as he shouted, "Our tribe's leader and leader are waiting for you. How dare you ignore them?" His voice was so loud that even the people far away could hear him. Everyone looked over. At the same time, from the stone house behind him, an old sigh could be faintly heard. There seemed to be a hint of helplessness in that voice. Until the end, Lu Chen still did not follow Hua Ying's orders. He put down the fire god's staff and entered the stone house to pay his respects to the tribe leader. To this black-robed priest, he didn't seem to care about anything other than the power in his hands that he would never let go. Before he left, he told Hua Ying, who was almost in a state of rage, that if there was anything else, he could ask his grandfather and father to go to the priest's stone house to find him. These words made Hua Ying fly into a rage. The shame of being humiliated in front of him and failing to complete his mission made this barbarian youth bristle with anger. He roared for his men to capture Lu Chen, but very quickly, reality taught him another lesson. The 20 black fire guards blocked the way in silence. But under the gloomy gazes of these people, the warriors behind Hua Ying didn't dare to rush over. They even grabbed Hua Ying tightly so that the angry youth wouldn't lose control and rush to his death. This was what happened in the Black Fire Tribe's camp. But it was the Black Fire Guards who had been captured by the Divine Tree, who had suppressed the young chief of the Black Fire Tribe. This was, of course, a major event that shook the entire tribe. So very quickly, warriors of the Black Fire Tribe rushed over from all directions. The atmosphere in the camp suddenly became tense. Some people began to appear around the priest's stone house intentionally or unintentionally. Some warriors slowly approached and surrounded the stone house. But inside the stone house, everything seemed to be very calm. Yi had also returned. After seeing the confrontation just now, her heart was beating very fast. She had many questions to ask this black-robed priest, but she didn't dare to speak. But after a while, a question suddenly came from the dark shadows. "How many days has it been since you last saw the Rock Chief?" You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.